Okay, everybody, we're ready. Your Ben Joravsky Show for Friday, July 19th. Sorry for the delay. We are ready to roll. Is moments away, but before we get into that, we need to thank the following unions for jumping on board and helping bring back the Ben Joravsky Show. First up, it's the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers, Local 126 and District 8, the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 9, and the International Union of Operating Engineers, Local 150. A giant thank you to those unions for jumping on board and helping bring back the Ben Joravsky Show. And, of course, today's program is brought to you by our good friends at the Chicago Federation of Labor. The Ben Joravsky Show indeed start. Once again, sorry for the delay, everybody, but it does start now. It is Friday, July 19th, and live from the Chicago Sun-Times Chicago Reader Studio on Racine Avenue, this is the Ben Joravsky Show. Today on the program, it's another Romana Rundown with Sun-Times editor Romana Hussein. We welcome back to France Smart and host of the Fight podcast, Sergio Vicente, and the Ben Joravsky Show debut of criminal defense attorney Tony Thefford. And now your host, not a criminal defense attorney. The last person you'd want handling that one.
That's for sure.
Chicago Reader columnist Ben Joravsky.
Yeah, hello, everybody. Ben Joravsky here. We're calling this Junk Science Friday. And here's why. So a story today, when I woke up bright and early in the New York Times about the latest ruling from Donald Trump's EPA. Here's the newspaper. And here's the headline. EPA refuses to ban pesticide seen as children's health risk. Okay, now let's just break it down real simple. The Obama administration had put a ban on a pesticide that is sprayed on fruits and vegetables. The supporters of the pesticide industry pointed out that pesticide helped keep bugs off of fruit and vegetables. The scientists who've studied the pesticide's impact on children said it destroyed the brains of children. So here's your choice, America. Bugless fruit and vegetable or destroyed brains in children. President Barack Obama studied that, thought destroyed brains, bugless fruit, and decided to go on the side of caution, err on the side of caution, and ban the pesticide, moved to ban the pesticide because he wanted to favor and help the brains of children in this country. How about that? And what was the response of lobbyists in the pesticide industry and their Republican supporters? Quote, junk science. Well, that's simple, everybody. On the one hand, you have Obama and his complicated and lengthy scientific analysis that's supported by most of the scientists in America that say it destroys the brains of children or potentially destroys the brains of children. And the other side, you've got Republicans saying junk science. And everybody wonders why it's so hard to defeat Republicans. They got those simple, easy to understand declarations. Anyway, when I was done reading that story, I turned to another article in the New York Times, which talked about Trump's latest Labor Department appointee, and that would be Eugene Scalia, otherwise known as Baby Scalia, because his father was Antonin Scalia, the former Justice of the Supreme Court. Anytime Republicans, you want to join in the chorus against nepotism when it comes to your party, feel free. Anyway, Baby Scalia is a big-time Washington lawyer who got in a little bit of trouble back in 2001 when George W. Bush, otherwise known as Baby Bush, speaking of Republican nepotism, wanted to appoint him to a top legal position. And let's just go back to the New York Times account of what happened. Hold on. I'm going to open up my New York Times, turn to page 14, and here we go. His appointment was controversial because Baby Scalia, well, they don't really call him Baby Scalia, was nominated by Mr. Bush in 2001 to serve as solicitor of the Justice Department, but was never confirmed by the Senate, which was controlled by Democrats at the time. Many Democrats and unions said he was too closely aligned with employers and hostile to the interest of workers. Much of the fear about Scalia's nomination at the time was based on his opposition to a Clinton administration regulation that would have protected workers from repetitive stress industries, which became known as the ergonomics rule. Okay. So on one hand, you had studies showing that the repetitive stress hurt workers, and he was against it on the grounds of, quote, junk science. Yeah. I just like that. By reading today's New York Times, I learned that junk science has been around for a long, long time. I didn't even know that, D.
It's about as good as fake news.
Well, great minds think alike. Because that's what I thought when I was reading this story. I was saying, you know what? It sure is easy to be a Republican because you come out with these simple declarations that just blow apart all the analysis that people work really hard to prepare. So you could say junk science, or you could say fake news, or you could just say send her back, or you could say lock her up. It's really easy to be a Republican. Anyway, then I moved on in my exploration of today's news, and I read an article which was a fact check about Donald Trump, some of the accusations that Donald Trump has been making about Congresswoman Ilhan Omar.
By the way, you forgot one.
No collusion.
Oh, yeah, I forget. No, I got to write that down. No collusion. Right. Yeah, good point. Whoa. Mueller writes like a gazillion page expose of every wrong deal that Trump has ever done. It's all there for you to read, America. By the way, just stop by the our little office here, and you can read it. And what does Trump say? No collusion. Anyway, so I moved on with the newspaper. I was reading a story, a fact analysis, a fact check of Donald Trump's accusations against Ilhan Omar. And one of the accusations that Trump is trotting out or repeating is that once upon a time, Omar was married to her brother. Now, this is just something that somebody made up and threw out there on the internet, and Republicans repeat. And now Donald Trump goes, well, they say that she was married to her brother. I don't know if it's true or not, which is just sort of repeating it and takes sort of out of that sentence. Anyway, the fact check points out, follow me on this, folks, that the man that Omar used to be married to was born after Omar's mother had died. All right? So just one more time. The man she was supposed to be married to was born after her mother had died. Therefore, it is biologically impossible that they could have shared the same mother. So she is not he is not her brother. And what did Trump do when confronted with that biological proof that the accusation is wrong? He said, junk science. Well, he didn't really say it, folks, but he would have if you asked him about it. We got a great show today, everybody. Ramana Hussein will be here. No junk science. Ramana Hussein. She'll be breaking down all the news of the week. And we'll probably doing a lot of Trump talk with Ramana. Tefran Smart will be here, community activist with Sergio Vicente. He's the host of the Fight podcast. Love talking politics with those two. Probably ask Sergio for his thoughts again on how Democrats should deal with Donald Trump. And in the 2:30 hour, Tony Thedford will be making his debut. As Dennis said, he's a criminal defense lawyer. And we'll be talking about some of the criminal defense issues of the day. In fact, I may ask him, how he would defend Donald Trump if it came to impeachment, see what he has to say about that. So plenty of local political news, national political news, and state news. We'll get to all of it. But first, the doctor with the news.
Hey, guys, how's it going? I'm Dennis. It's the middle of the final day of the week. Bring it, weekend. Let's talk about the national news happening this afternoon. All right, first off here, we got a 2020 Democratic presidential candidate update here, and we have the list, the lineup. Debate night round 2 is underway, and remember, because there's damn near 30 candidates, the debate had to be scheduled into 2 nights, Tuesday, July 30th, and Wednesday, July 31st. And poor Grandpa Joe Biden.
Yeah.
Because once again, the former vice president will be on the same stage with California Senator and presidential candidate, the Biden Buster, Kamala Harris. Just made that nickname up.
That's pretty good.
Let's go through the lineup here. 20 candidates have made the cut. And yes, do not worry. One of those candidates is Marianne Williamson. Tuesday night will feature Mayor Pete Buttigieg, the forgotten one, Beto O'Rourke, Minnesota Senator Amy Klobuchar. Well, we kind of need some music here to add that up. There we go.
Oh, yeah.
Minnesota Senator Amy Klobuchar, Marianne Williamson, 2 gentlemen whose first names I had to look up on Google because I forgot all about them.
Who are they?
Montana Governor Steve Bullock.
Oh, yeah.
And Ohio Representative Tim Ryan.
Oh, yeah, Ryan. Remember him.
Those 2 are going to be on the first night. Former Colorado Governor John Hickenlooper, John Delaney, and our main event, Senator Bernie Sanders. Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth. I've got a plan for that, Warren.
Yeah, that was very well done, D. And Steve Bullock, the Montana governor, will be on the stage because Dennis's favorite candidate, Eric Swalwell, has dropped out of the race.
I know.
Tom Steyer, we talked about him, the California billionaire who I guess he announced he was running, but apparently he didn't have either enough money raised or enough support in the polls to make it. You know, there is some, like a very small requirement. You have to have at least 1% of the vote, I think, to be one of the 20. So he's not in it. And yes, the big showdown the first night will be Bernie versus Elizabeth Warren because they share some of the same constituents. Obviously, they're looking to draw from the same pool of voters, the sort of like the far left side of the Democratic Party, the far left side of the Democratic Party. And so they'll be their first opportunity to go toe-to-toe there. And then the second one, as Dee points out, and I'm looking forward to that one, Kamala Harris versus Joe Biden. In that first debate, Kamala Harris really got the better of Joe Biden. And so this will be Biden's opportunity to
go at her.
Or at least defend himself a little better than he did last time. And let me just say a couple things about this, D. I just want to say some of our guests, who I love every single guest who walks through that door, okay? I just got to say that to start with. But some of our guests are like, no, I don't watch debates. I'm better than the debates. I'm just saying this, guest.
Which guest was that?
Just some of our guests.
Oh, okay. No one in particular?
No one in particular.
Okay.
A bunch of them. This is so like I'm putting it all together. You like, guest, watch debates.
Sounded a little like Miles Conflassen, but whatever.
No, didn't Miles watch the debate?
Oh, well, that voice you were doing sounded like Miles.
That was my Miles. No, that was just sort of, I don't know what voice that is. That's some voice I hear in my head when I'm walking to the studio. Man, was it hot today, by the way, huh? When I was walking to the studio, I heard that voice in my head all the time. I don't like the debates. Folks, this is your opportunity. I know there's a lot of candidates, but this is your opportunity to try to figure out who is the best one to run against Donald Trump. You all say how much you want Donald Trump defeated. Well, here's your opportunity. See them on stage. See how quick they are on their feet. See how they react under pressure. See what ideas they have. See how they deal with Trump's lock her up and send her back rhetoric. So it's a great opportunity. You know what, D? I know I'm biased in this thing. I love political debates among Democrats. And it's like basketball. I can't get enough of it. And people, by the way, who say they don't like the debates remind me of people who say, well, I don't really watch basketball games until the end of the fourth quarter. You know what I'm saying, Dave? They're not even basketball fans.
That makes sense, though.
Which part?
Watching it at the end of the fourth quarter.
Well, if you got nothing else to do for the rest of it. But if like a basketball game is just... There's a ebb and a flow to it. There's the start of the game, the build up. There's the runs that teams make at each other. There's the dramas in the game. If you like basketball, you watch the whole game. If you don't like basketball, you just watch the last minute. Anyway, you know what? If you don't like politics, just check in November of 2020. Then you'll see who your choice is.
All right, we covered night one. On to night two, Wednesday, July 31st. We got Kamala Harris and Joe Biden also in the debate. Tulsi Gabbard, Michael Bennett, Bill, why are you even running de Blasio? Jay Inslee, Editor Leah's favorite, Cory Booker, Andrew Yang, and Julian Castro.
Yeah, this is round two, second one. Tulsi Gabbard, by the way, I saw a poll. She's the favorite Democrat of far-right Republicans. That's an interesting little claim to make. And Andrew Yang is the favorite. I'm not quite sure who he's the favorite of. He really, in the last debate, Kitty Kurth, who was in the room at debate night, she's a Marianne Williamson supporter, said that Yang's microphone was constantly being turned off. Huge disadvantage if you can't be heard when your microphone's turned off.
Yang was a little too chill. Had his hands in his pockets, just chilling out. A little too chill, dude.
Yeah, and then we pointed that out to Kitty Kurth, and she said, well, it's hard not to be chill when they turn your mic off. So there you go. That's their explanation. So maybe they'll turn his mic on this time around, D.
So there it is, your Democratic debate night round two lineup, and you better believe that we'll be talking all about it once it goes down. And it looks like the herd could be possibly thinning soon. Two of the Democratic presidential primaries, lower polling candidates, former Colorado Governor John Hickenlooper and former Congressman John Delaney, are being urged at the moment to leave the race. Say what? Yeah, it's true. Some of Delaney's senior advisors set him down last week to encourage him to drop out of the primary by mid-August, according to Axios. Hickenlooper has been getting the same advice. This one a little less subtle. Dude, run for Senate! Colorado's Republican Senator Cory Gardner is up for re-election next year, and many Democrats in the state think Hickenlooper would have been the best chance to beat him.
Yeah, that is Kitty Kurt's theory. Well, not just about Hickenlooper, but just about half the people on the stage should be running for Senate, including Beto O'Rourke. What was that? So yeah, the sooner the better. I get to get those Senate races going. Maybe the notoriety they get from getting 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 minutes of talk time in these debates will help them. But you're absolutely correct. Even if the Democrats take back the White House, and I hope they take back the White House, it'll be very challenging and difficult to get their legislation through if Mitch McConnell still controls the Senate. So it would be nice if you would like an end to this far right wing legislation that we see pounded down our throats all the time. Appointments like the EPA, for instance, who want to undo bans on pesticides. Would be nice to have the Democrats running the Senate. So yeah, come on, Hickenlooper, get back to go back to the Senate.
And finally, let's end out the national news with an update on that one national story that has been dominating the headlines. And it looks like it's not going anywhere for a while. Donald Trump versus the Squad. Quick recap. On Sunday, our president, Donald J. Trump, in a tweet, told the 4 Democratic minority congresswomen, also known as the Squad, to go back to where they came from. All hell broke loose after that online and on the news shortly after. Trump then held one of his stupid rallies, and when addressing Minnesota Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, Trump supporters in the crowd began chanting, "Send her back." The next day, yesterday, Donald Trump disavowed those comments. Well, sort of.
Yeah.
You listen and you be the judge. Maybe.
It happened. Why didn't you stop them? Why didn't you ask them to stop saying that?
Well, number one, I think I did. I started speaking very quickly. It really was a loud, I disagree with it, by the way, but it was quite a chant, and I felt a little bit badly about it.
So you'll tell your supporters never to say that again?
I would say that. I was not happy with it. I disagree with it, but again, I didn't say that, they did, but I disagree.
But they were echoing what you said in your first tweet, that they should go back.
Well, I don't think if you examine it, I don't think you'll find that, but I disagree with it.
Well, there's that.
If you examine the tweet, won't find that you said go back to the countries you came from, which is what started this whole thing in the first place. Donald Trump's ability just to make stuff up at the moment's notice and just doesn't matter what the evidence is to contradict what he's saying is truly extraordinary. And by the way, maybe we could play back and do a time the amount of silence Donald Trump. He stood there while the crowd was chanting, "Send her back, send her back." I've seen it a couple times on the tape. He's just basking in their cheer. So that smug little Donald Trump look he's got.
I got it right here. Let's listen.
The president doesn't speak again until it dies down.
Omar has a history of launching vicious anti-Semitic screeds. 'And she talked about the evil Israel.
Later.
14 seconds. Almost 15 seconds. 14 and a half seconds he sat there silently. And what did he say, D? I started speaking very quickly. Okay. 14.5 seconds.
So now here we are on Friday, and we've now learned that Trump's daughter Ivanka, wife Melania, and even his vice president Mike Pence encouraged the president to disavow the send her back chants. Pence also heard from congressional Republicans who asked him to relay their concerns about the chant to the president. And that's that story there.
Yeah, well, let's just point out they didn't do it. They didn't encourage him publicly to do that. Mike Pence has been silenced on this issue. It's funny. I'll be talking about this with our guest today. I'm not quite sure why they're so upset with send her back, but lock her up seems to be okay. So we'll talk about that with the guest. Like, why is send her back less offensive than lock her up? Anyway, so we'll talk about that later with the guest.
Now, of course, we'll keep you posted on these stories as today's program rolls along. People, we are moving on because coming up right now, we're going to find out what's going on locally. It's time for What Else is News. And a familiar friend of the Ben Joravsky Show has returned. And by friend, we mean the complete opposite. She's not a friend at all. In fact, We find her to be insane, but hot damn did she give us some great content throughout the years. You'll find out who that is in a moment. But first, it was yesterday's top story locally. Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot announced 5 potential locations for Chicago's soon-to-be brand-new casino. The following comes from WBEZ and Claudia Morell. Mayor Lori Lightfoot has acknowledged that she could have handled the rollout of potential Chicago casino locations better. That was after some aldermen complained they weren't given notice of 5 locations the city said it will study. Here is the quote from Lightfoot. Quote, "The headline should never be aldermen surprised. That should never happen. And if that happened, that's a failure on our part. We will own it and we will correct it."
Yeah, well, there were Lord Lightfoot in that same press conference pointed out that she may select a site that's not on that list. That we talked about that a lot yesterday. That was the pretty funny thing. Lori Lightfoot shows her hand was the headline. Lori Lightfoot unveils 5 sites, and then the smaller print in the Sun-Times story. Got to give the Sun-Times credit. They got that in there, that she doesn't have to select one of the sites. That was one of those 5 sites that she listed. So that immediately triggered to me, oh, she's not going to take this site. She's going to go downtown. She just needs time to let these like balloons flop and fail, throw out these trial balloons. And sure enough, she came out at that press conference and said, well, I may take a site other than the one in those. Interesting little notion she gave at that press conference. She said that the convention industry is opposed to a casino site in the area around the McCormick Place because they think conventioneers would spend too much time gambling and not enough time at the convention. It doesn't seem to bother Vegas at all. Vegas is one of the biggest draws for conventions, and they're the gambling headquarters of the United States. So curious little opposition coming from the convention industry there, Dean.
All right, and it looks like here it says 2 South Side aldermen were quick to reject potential sites in their wards when the mayor revealed the preliminary site list in a press release, but the mayor also seemed to consider the opposition a bit premature, adding that none of the 5 potential locations on the city's south and west sides are set in stone. More quotes from Lightfoot. Quote, "Don't get fixated on those because those may or may not be the actual sites." Hey, you said that yesterday.
Yes, indeed.
The mayor added, saying the city had to identify potential locations for an independent consultant it is paying to determine if a casino is worth the investment.
Yeah. Well, listen, as we talked about this with Jason Grotto about a week ago, you can hear it, one of our bonus interviews. They're already borrowing against the money they anticipate the state is from gambling. So it doesn't really matter what the consultant says. They're anticipating money from these casinos, and so these casinos will be coming. Now, where they come, I do not know. My guess, we got to bring Dave Roeder in here sometime to go through the list. Dave Roeder is obsessively studying this stuff for the Chicago Sun-Times. But my guess is it's going to go somewhere downtown, and those neighborhood sites will all be ruled ineligible or not good enough or what have you before all is said and done.
Also, for more on that story, check out WBEZ. We're moving on. For those who hadn't listened to or followed our show prior to this Sun-Times Chicago Reader podcast venture, the show we did on the radio before Ben was fired? Yeah.
Oh, that show, yeah.
If you're new to the podcast, then you may not be fully aware of Illinois State Rep and former Illinois Republican gubernatorial candidate Jeanne Ives. Yeah, you may have heard her name a time or two during the election, but guys, this lady is crazy, all right? And I'm not talking about harmless Marianne Williamson crazy. Oh no, I'm talking full-on right-wing insanity that's right up there with our president of the United States. You need proof? Okay, well, here's her campaign ad from 2018 going against Bruce Rauner.
We want to say thank you.
Thank you, Bruce Rauner.
Thank you for signing legislation that lets me use the girls' bathroom.
Thank you for making all Illinois families pay for my abortions.
Thank you, Bruce Rauner, for opposing law enforcement and making Illinois a sanctuary state for illegal immigrant criminals.
Thank you for making the rest of Illinois bail out Chicago teacher pensions and for giving Rahm everything he wanted and more.
Thank you, Bruce Rauner, for not being in charge, leaving Mike Madigan in charge.
I am not in charge. I'm trying to get to be in charge.
Yeah, that's her, Jeanne Ives.
Memories, D.
Miss
Memories. Her? I miss it. Romana Hussein, by the way, who will be our first guest, is already in the studio. She's just smiling at the memories of Jeanne Ives and her campaign for governor when she challenged Bruce Rauner from the right, if such a thing is possible. She said he was too liberal. And wow, it's like a nightmare.
Well, I could tell you miss her, so I guess this is good news for you. She's back.
Yes, she is.
Oh my God, Jeanne Ives is back.
Yeah.
The following comes from the Illinois political bulldogs over at Illinois Politico and one Shia Kapos. Former state rep Jeanne Ives, who waged a bitter challenge against then Governor Bruce Rauner in last year's GOP gubernatorial primary, has thrown her hat in the ring for the 6th congressional district. The district that Sean Casten won recently. Ives bid to unseat Democrat Sean Casten assures fireworks. Republicans have identified the seat, which pulls from Chicago's western suburbs, as a battleground. Casten and fellow freshman Democratic Rep. Lauren Underwood yanked their suburban seats from Republicans in 2018, and the GOP wants revenge.
Yes, they want revenge, but I don't think they're going to get it moving this far to the right. And Evelyn Sanguinetti, who was Browner's lieutenant governor, is also announced that she's going to run for Sean Casten's seat. So there's going to be a fight in the Republican primary between Jeanne Ives and Evelyn Sanguinetti. My guess is they're going to both move right to get the nomination. And I don't think that district will elect somebody that right wing. So for once, the Republicans are going to have to worry about whether they go too far to the extreme, where Democrats are struggling with that one right now. So I think Sean Casten will probably prevail.
Well, Jeanne Ives is back. Oh my God.
Yeah.
So there you are, just like that. You're now in the know of what's going on locally, and now you'll have an answer the next time someone asks you, hey, what else is news?
All right, let me tell you something that Evelyn Sanguinetti, Jeanne Ives, and Sean Casten all agree. You did a great job. Give yourself a raise. Take it out of petty cash. Ramana Hussein is sitting there. We're going to bring her on when we return.
Read the Chicago Reader to get up to speed on what's what in Chicago. Culture, food, arts and entertainment, weekly concert listings, weekly event listings, the environment, travel. I can continue, but you get the point. And for all of you Chicago political junkies, raw weekly columns on real city politics from Maya Dukmasova and our very own Ben Joravsky. The Chicago Reader, free to the public in newsstands throughout the city and online at chicagoreader.com. Read it now and be a more informed Chicagoan. Today's Ben Joravsky Show was brought to you in part by Chicago Architecture Center. Discover the breadth and majesty of Chicago's architecture on a Chicago Architecture Center bus tour. From bungalows to Bauhaus, our expert docents will share the fascinating stories behind our city's architecture. Book your tour at architecture.org/tours. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm actually on a bus tour right now. Oh my, look at that wonderful piece of architecture. Get a special discount for Illinois residents from July 15th to August 15th. All Illinois residents get 50% off select walking tours. Visit architecture.org/IL-resident.
Hey, playing now at Steppenwolf Theater, the world premiere of Ms. Black for President. It's inspired by the true, that's true as in it really happened, TRUE story of Joan Jett Black, America's first drag queen presidential candidate. You know who created it, D?
No.
It was created by Tony nominee Tina Landau.
Oh.
And you know who else created it?
No.
Oscar winner Terrell Alvin McCraney. You know him, Moonlight.
Oh, yeah.
For tickets, visit steppenwolf.org. That's Steppenwolf, like the rock group from the 60s.
Hang tight, millennials. All right, our friends at the Chicago Sun-Times are offering you, yes, you, our listeners, an exclusive deal on unlimited digital access to all of the stories that you love. Unlock every feature, video, and podcast, just like our show, The Ben Joravsky Show, by signing up now for a digital subscription. For a limited time only, you can lock in our lowest rate yet, only $29.99 for a full year of all the news that you need to know. Stay up to date on breaking stories, get the deep dives and investigations from Sun-Times reporters, cheer for the big games with the best sports team in the city, and go deep inside City Hall with best in-class political reporting. $29.99 for a full year of unlimited access. Guys, I looked online everywhere. You can't do better than that. So take advantage of this exclusive deal now at suntimes.com/Ben. That's you. Welcome back to the Ben Joravsky Show, live from the Chicago Sun-Times.
Yes, indeed, we are live. Ramana Hussein is in the studio. She comes here every Friday. Ramana's Rundown, editor at the Chicago Sun-Times, and we've been talking all week when we pass each other in the hallways here, Ramana. Unbelievable what Trump's up to. It is unbelievable. I guess it shouldn't be unbelievable, but it is. Your general thoughts. Let's start there.
I'm not surprised by the comments that President Trump had made on Twitter last week. Mm-hmm. It's been a long time coming. A lot of people probably think, oh, this is like a first. But I think the language against people who are always marginalized or are seen as marginalized has always kind of been there. One of the things I think is kind of interesting is that a lot of people have been posting John McCain's response to a commenter, or like there was like some town hall debate where this woman had said, she said, I heard Barack Obama is an Arab. And, you know, a lot of people use this is the way that you should diffuse racism, but it actually really isn't. And I think a lot of people see it differently depending on what their background is. So in this, like, if you watch it, a lot of people are posting on Twitter yesterday, and it gets a lot of Muslims and or Arabs really angry because some groups think, oh, this is like the proper way to deal with racism, but it's not. And it's been there all the time. I mean, Barack Obama was othered because people thought he was a Muslim. So I'll explain that. Yeah. So basically, this woman, you know, there's a town hall meeting, John McCain's there, and this woman goes, oh, I heard Barack Obama's an Arab. And then John McCain goes, no. He's not an Arab. And then the next line is, he's a good man. Yeah. And I know a lot of people are like, that's the way. I remember when that happened, someone posted a Facebook post, and I said, well, actually, for a lot of people, it sounds like he's saying, no, he's not an Arab, and he's a good man, meaning that, you know, you can't be an Arab and a good man. And I think language like that has been persistent for a long time, and it's kind of on both aisles. And this is just more Trump's sentiments, a little more blatant, I think, and it's not very surprising to me. So when Barack Obama was running for president, Barack Obama is a very Muslim name. If you're Muslim, Barack, we say, when we have holidays, we say, like for Eid, we say Eid Mubarak. It means blessing. So Barack is kind of a name that comes from that. He had a Muslim father. He also had a Muslim stepfather. You know, and so he definitely had that background. So that was used as a quote unquote slur. And I just remember, I'm just saying, being a Muslim and reading all these columns, and even from people who are well-meaning, they're making it seem like it's a bad thing to be called a Muslim. So, you know, and he's not. And, you know, I know that's one thing that I emphasize. When I went to India that year when Obama did get elected, my cousins were like, isn't he a Muslim? I'm like, no, he isn't. I actually remember when he was running for state, when he was running for the Senate, he came to actually one of our Eid prayers, like our holidays, and, you know, he said Assalamu alaikum. He knew Arabic words, and I remember my family friends were like, isn't he Muslim? I'm like, no, he's not. But I remember, this is like before, but, you know, a lot of people did confuse that because he has that background. But for people to make it seem like that's not an asset is just kind of interesting, because and I think that's kind of snowballed into this, where it's acceptable to say this now in our presidency. I'm just saying that there are very subtle ways people have otherized individuals who don't look like what the norm is. I mean, we even had Joe Biden saying that Barack Obama looked clean and articulate. Yeah. What does that mean? And it's very I'm just saying it's not surprising for a lot of us who have been told to go back to our own countries.
By the way, it's not particularly subtle either in the case of Trump.
No. That's what I mean. I go, it's not shocking. That's what I'm saying.
Now, here, the other thing, when you mentioned Barack Obama, brought back a memory. I just wrote a note down. And this shows the ability of Republicans to say whatever they have to say at any given moment, even if it contradicts what they said an hour before. And I'm just doing this off the top of my head. Barack Obama went to a church on the south side of Chicago where the reverend was Jeremiah Wright.
Oh, yeah.
A church, a reverend. And the Republicans used Reverend Wright in some of his controversial statements against Obama. And then the next breath they said he's a Muslim. Yeah. So it's like on one hand,
or a socialist. Yeah. I know there are people who are confused of whether he was a Muslim or a socialist. And that's just telling. And, you know, this is Jeremiah Wright saying things that for some people is very inflammatory. But I bet if you talk to a lot of people in the Black community, they'll probably agree with him. And so he had to distance himself away from his leader at the church. Meanwhile, Trump is getting away with so many things left and right. I just think it's so telling of our country. And
it's a double standard.
And it's like, could you imagine if there was video of Barack Obama dancing really bad with women at a convicted pedophile's party? Like, it just wouldn't hold. I mean, it's just very fascinating.
No, the double standard,
in a sad way.
And I don't know if I brought to you, but this equivalency issue is really troubling for the Democrats. Where, in other words, Donald Trump is allowed to say absolutely all these outrageous comments. Donald Trump is allowed to go to the far right in the political spectrum. But Democrats are concerned that even if they rebut Donald Trump too much, or even if they champion their Democratic, their values, etc., their programs, they're going to lose the middle. I'm like, what's the middle? If you're afraid,
I agree. I just don't understand. Like, you can't label the comments that he said as racist. Like, some people have such a hard time saying that, and for a lot of us, it is racist. And how, there's some people like just waffling, like, oh, we don't want, they're so scared. And I'm like, these same people are so willing to call people that look like me terrorists without even thinking twice.
Yeah.
So they have such a hard time saying that this guy is racist. And, like I said, I've seen a lot of people kind of recounting the times they've been told to go back to their country or, go back to where they came from. And this is now the president of the United States saying that.
Well, now it seems as though, and help me with this one, the chant "Send her back."
Yeah.
Have you heard that?
Yeah, I heard about the rally where he, Donald Trump, he seems to be, he's definitely focusing on those 4 women, Ayanna Pressley, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Ilhan Omar, and Rashida Tlaib. And he seems to be taking a focus on Ilhan Omar, who's the most visibly Muslim because she wears a hijab. Rashida Tlaib is also Muslim. He said that he was trying to diffuse the situation and tried to talk very quickly at that rally where all those individuals were saying "send her back." Yeah. And there was Trevor Noah actually has this. He just tweeted a couple things and showed the pause that he had for a long time, and he wasn't really trying to diffuse the situation.
We just before you came in, we timed it.
Yeah,
and it's 14.5 seconds is the pause. And the joke that Trevor Noah did was that
he showed him all these things you could do, like somebody solving a Rubik's Cube and all this other stuff.
Usain Bolt winning the running a race. In fact, all the runners had finished the race before in the pause. So he clearly, again, he's lying. Again, yes, sir.
I was going to say, we have an update here. This is recently. Donald Trump has gone back on what he said about the crowd. Ben called it yesterday.
I called it yesterday.
What did he say? Well, what did he say? That they're nice people?
Trump on Greenville, North Carolina crowd. Those are incredible people. Yeah, those are incredible patriots. Here we go. God damn it. It's doing that thing where you can hardly hear. There we go.
With the fact that a congresswoman, in this case, a different congresswoman, can call our country and our people garbage. That's what I'm unhappy with. Those people in North Carolina, that stadium was packed. It was a record crowd, and I could have filled it 10 times, as you know. Those are incredible people. Those are incredible patriots. But I'm unhappy when a congresswoman goes and said, I'm going to be the president's nightmare. She's going to be the president's nightmare. She's lucky to be where she is, let me tell you. And the things that she has said are a disgrace to our country. Thank you very much, everybody.
Yeah, I'm like, Dennis, that was very well done.
I actually did read about him saying that but I was confused. I'm like, is he saying that about the people at that rally from 2017, or is he saying about the rally, the white supremacist rally? So now he's saying this crowd.
He was
is
talking
great
about the
people.
crowd.
Yeah.
Okay, so here we go. The crowd chanted "Send her back." He basked in their chant, waited till it subsided, then started talking again.
Yeah.
Then with the fallout looked like it was going to be tough for him, and Republicans were begging and pleading with him to walk it back. So yesterday he gave these comments at a press conference where he kind of walked it back and said, I didn't agree with it, and I talked immediately to silence it. And when we played it yesterday, I go, D, I guarantee you tomorrow he'll walk back. And
he did.
And he just did.
It's just, I don't know.
So
I'm not surprised, but it's just appalling that I guess what I'm more appalled by is the people who are just standing by and not saying anything. The people that should know better, that have been, in elected offices for longer. It just shows you that they really don't have a backbone.
Well, this is another one of our favorite themes, is that all these difficult challenges that our country faces are only on one side. The Democratic side deals with it. So, for instance, when the Me Too movement really erupted and was front page news and accusations almost like every week there was a different accusation, the Republican candidate for the Senate seat in Alabama was Roy Moore. Mm-hmm. And Republicans to a T were endorsing, including Donald Trump.
Yeah.
And Roy Moore was the guy, for people forget, who
dated
was
underage.
Well, dating is
children. I should say it was having relationships with children.
That's a kind word. Dating.
Yeah,
It was patrolling malls when he was like 30 something.
It's like saying having sex when you should be saying raping, right?
So anyway, so Democrats were dealing with punishing Al Franken. We're dealing with the issue of sexual harassment. Republicans just ignored it, embraced the sexual harassers among them, and they were rewarded for it by their constituents. Now you have the president being openly racist, clearly appealing to all, trying to wedge issues that will inflame his supporters and rile them up and get them to vote for him because they hate people who look differently than them. Mm-hmm. Democrats are talking about how intolerable it is. We get not a word from Republicans. In other words, the debate isn't on both sides of the aisle.
No, it's. I mean, I think there are some Democrats, like you said, who are like afraid to say certain things. But yeah, it's just interesting. It's like if there was a Democrat who did that, you guys are all speaking out against Bill Clinton and his various, moral failures, but you're not saying anything about Trump's allegations against Trump or Roy Moore or any others for that matter, like the Epstein stuff. Is it Jeffrey Epstein?
Yes,
like
Jeffrey Epstein,
the ties that Donald Trump has to Jeffrey Epstein. Mm-hmm. It's like if there was a Democrat who had any ties, if Ilhan Omar had some ties to Jeffrey Epstein, that would be all over the place. That would be the thing that they would be calling her out on, because they're calling her out on random things that aren't even true.
And he's named the four.
Yeah.
Okay. If I think my prediction, here your prediction, Presley will sort of be dropped quietly from that list. Okay, because
she's African American.
She's not Muslim.
Yeah.
And people don't really know her.
Ilhan Omar. Yeah. I mean, I know. My husband, Mick, was saying, he said that when Donald Trump was running, it wasn't like he said, he was more attacking the brown communities, the Latinos, or what, Muslims are perceived to be from brown communities, although, there's Muslims all over the world. So his campaign was kind of posed on these outsiders, quote unquote outsiders. So yeah, I could see him
just quietly dropping, because they're probably doing testing, polling, to see like which one is the worst. And I think
Ilhan Omar is going to be, because I think she's the most, my theory is because she's the most visibly Muslim. She's wearing a hijab, and that's enough. Rashida Tlaib is also a Muslim and has spoken out against Trump. I mean, she said F Trump, didn't she? Or so she was, she was pretty vocal to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
And by the way, congratulations for not swearing.
I didn't know. I know there's
rules. You're totally allowed to swear on this show. Yes. Oh my God.
FCC.
No.
George Carlin.
A podcast. It's a podcast. So all rules, but we do post some of our interviews.
Someone might make it on Lumpin' Radio.
Yeah, someone make it on Lumpin' Radio. And Adolfo, a dear friend of the show, was
not going to make it on Lumpin' Radio.
Because he went off on Donald John Trump the other day.
I'm just saying, as a student in college, I remember that we had to listen to the George Carlin tape, the bit that he had, the 7 words you can't say.
Oh my God, that's so funny. You studied that. This is the age difference between Ramona and me. I actually heard it. Like, oh my God, that's so cool. And then,
there's classes on Keanu Reeves now, so things have changed since I've been to college too.
Classes on Keanu Reeves?
Yeah, like on the filmography of Keanu Reeves.
Oh, I thought you were talking about how like when he takes pictures with people, if there's like women present, he doesn't touch them. It looks like his arms are around him, but if you look close, his hands aren't.
He's trying to be a gentleman.
Oh, really? Keanu Reeves. Okay.
Everybody loves Keanu Reeves.
All right,
but yeah, I think he's definitely has a certain place in his heart for Ilhan Omar, and I think it's definitely because she's the most visibly Muslim. Mm-hmm. That's just my feeling. And those individuals that follow Donald Trump and think Muslims are all terrorists, that's
I think
why
that's
he's
what's
going
gonna
for that.
settle.
And because he seems like the last few days, she's very vocal, because I know she was asked about his comments on Twitter and whether she's afraid for her life. And she spoke out a couple days ago. I saw a group of reporters following her, and she's pretty vocal, but all four of them are vocal.
Yeah, no.
Also, Ayanna Pressley, I did not know was from Chicago.
Oh my God, we've been talking about that on
Sorry,
the Ben
I didn't know
Joravsky
that.
show.
Well,
Yes.
I'm learning a lot about Mitch McConnell's
All right, here
ties.
you go. I know you were not listening because we talked about the success. So here's the trivia question for you: what high school did Ayanna Pressley attend?
Latin?
Close.
Didn't she?
You are in the right ballpark.
Lincoln.
No.
I
You
know.
gotta stay private. You gotta stay private school. Latin's a private school.
Yeah, that's why I knew it was a private school. I remember reading about it the other day. Sorry, which
Man, we had a big prize we were going to give you if you got it right. Francis Parker, the Colonels.
Yeah, okay.
Francis Parker battles Latin.
Daryl Hannah, I think, went to Francis Parker.
That is very good.
Yeah,
You're now no what? But Trump's not trashing her. You notice?
No.
Wait.
No.
What's her?
But Ilhan Omar is also the only one, I think, that wasn't born in the United States. So that's his whole thing also, because she's from Somalia. Yeah. So technically she's also African American, but I think she's been a citizen longer than Melania has. But all these Republicans aren't looking at their wives, which I was looking up Mitch McConnell's love life. I never really cared about Mitch McConnell's love life, but when I was watching CNN the other day and he claimed that Donald Trump was not racist, someone asked him about his wife, and I'm like, okay, when I think of Mitch McConnell, I think his wife is some woman that looks like she's from Little House on the Prairie. So I was like, wait, his wife is an immigrant? So then I found out that he was married to Elaine Chao, the transportation secretary, who was also in Trump's cabinet and worked for George W. Bush as well, I believe. So I was like, okay, I know this woman is not his first wife, because I cannot see this guy being a young man and falling in love with an Asian American woman. I just can't. Some guy from Kentucky. I'm sorry, I'm being very stereotypical.
Yes,
so
you
anyway,
are.
So anyway, I admit it. Anyway, I looked up, so he had been married before to this woman named Cheryl Redman.
Yes.
And it turns out that after they got divorced, they were married from 1968 to 1980. After they got divorced, she became a feminist scholar at Smith College.
Amazing, yeah.
And she has worked with Gloria Steinem on
what do you
a
make
different
of
project.
all this?
And it says she's been credited for trying to make the school more racially and more, I guess, racially diverse. And I just find that, I find that fascinating. I think it's interesting that nobody has really done long pieces on her. Maybe she's pretty private. And I also looked up, so he has, Mitch McConnell has 3 daughters. And from what I understand, at least some of them veer left, and they were very vocal and tweeted during the Kavanaugh hearings.
Well,
so I just find that fascinating.
I know we had this conversation when we were passing in the hallway. Ben, did you know? Made me think about Mitch McConnell, who is probably as responsible as anyone in this country, not named Donald Trump, for this sort of the right-wing agenda that's prevailing in Washington. And I'm going to apply the Rahm Emanuel test to him. So here's the Rahm Emanuel test. Does Rahm Emanuel really believe sort of like the centrist neoliberal gospel that he preached when he was mayor, and the programs that he tried to implement, privatizing, closing public schools, et cetera, and so forth? Or did he think that was the pathway to victory for him? In other words, was he just looking out for his own very narrow electoral interests, or did he actually believe the stuff he was saying? This is a debate I've had with many people, including your husband.
I think he did believe what he was saying.
All right, okay,
that's what I believe.
All right, now let's apply that to Mitch McConnell. Now take a look at the women Mitch McConnell has married, the daughters that he has. Do you think he believes the extreme right-wing ideology that he preaches and pushes in the Senate, or do you think he's just doing that because he thinks it's the fastest way to victory and to stay in office and power?
I have a hard time reading him, because maybe his wife became feminist after being married to him.
That's a good point.
And Elaine Chao isn't really someone that Asian Americans who aren't really interested in what Trump has to say find her necessarily a sympathetic figure in all of this too. But he did raise children that are actually thinking for themselves. You don't know if it's the mom that was pushing this or him. And I think I think a lot of these leaders, maybe him included, they know there's something wrong with certain things that Donald Trump is saying, but they're too. Do you think Mitch McConnell really believes that Donald Trump isn't racist? I mean,
this thing about
I feel like his mouth, his lipless mouth, kind of twitches.
Yeah,
but I don't know. I just feel like he has no lips.
I know, but his lip, but the twitching of the lipless
I never really see the twitching. Like, he just seems like, when he was asked, and he was actually asked by an Indian American journalist about his wife. He goes, what would you do if someone said that about your wife? And he just kind of didn't answer the question. He ducked it. But he was on Fox. So I don't know. Part of me believes, like, maybe part of him does believe this, because I think then he was on Fox News and someone said, he said, well, I'm glad my wife doesn't want to go back to Taiwan or something. It's one of those things. He did talk. He kind of espoused a little more on it. So I don't know. With Mitch McConnell, I don't know what to. I think there's got to be some Republicans, even the ones I don't agree with. There's got to be something in their mind that's like clicking, and for a lot of these guys who are like conservative Christians, I'm like, do you really think Donald Trump represents the kind of Christian you are?
Yeah.
He doesn't. He's not like.
There was a column in yesterday's Sun-Times. I didn't do enough, give it enough time. I really want to give credit to S.E. Cupp, who's a conservative columnist that runs in the Sun-Times about once a week or so. And she gave a very principled takedown of Donald Trump and the Republican Party using what's supposed Republican values to annihilate them. And she didn't do one of those things that so many Republican or conservative columnists do, which is immediately start talking about Bill Clinton.
Yeah.
Donald Trump's bad, but what about Bill Clinton?
Yeah.
And no, she just said, this is a disgrace to us as Republicans. And so I have to tip my hat to him. But Mitch McConnell I think he was the one who uttered Donald Trump doesn't have a racist bone in his body.
Yeah, and so this is why, I kind of feel like, I try to give them the benefit of the doubt, but Mitch McConnell, I think today he said something like Donald Trump was, quote, onto something with his comments. So it makes me think like, no, I think his wife became like this feminist scholar for a reason.
And the daughters,
I'm just saying it was probably a reaction, right?
To living with him.
Yeah, that's what I think. But
we got a quote from Mitch McConnell. Can't understand it, but that's a quote.
What does Bruce Rauner have to say about it? And what about Marge Simpson?
I don't.
Sorry,
that's Simpson's character.
All right, now could not be a Romana segment without some kind of recommendation. Romana, let's end this on a brighter note. It is really distressing times in our country.
It is.
And we'll be talking about it further with our next guests, DeFrance and Sergio. But let's end on a brighter note, at least our conversation, before I send you off to editing articles. So any recommendations? Every week you have a recommendation.
Well, I was recommended by my brother, kind of forced to watch the Aziz Ansari comedy special. I do not like Aziz Ansari, really. I'm not saying I despise him, but I don't really find. It's
all right. You don't despise him.
I know a lot of people were fascinated by his show, Master of None. There was certain episodes I liked, and then there were certain episodes I didn't like because his voice is very grating for me.
Yeah.
And I just found his voice very grating. By the way, which is fine, but it's interesting. A lot of South Asians think that he's kind of doing this show for his show's kind of for the white gaze. Like, he does so many things that are not no Indian person. I mean, I know our parents probably think we're all whitewashed ourselves, but I was like, there's just some things his character or says and does, and he talks, and I think it's kind of cool that he does talk. He brings up his heritage. His parents were on the show. But then every once in a while, he'll do something that's okay, that is so not South Asian, and no South Asian would do that. You're totally playing for the white gaze and showing people oh, I'm not like those other Indians. And, it's just.
Wait, what other Indians does he not like?
No, it's not people he likes, but his whole persona and character is oh, I'm just this millennial hipster. Yeah, and I'm okay, you're it's when you're South Asian, it's he's pandering to the white hipsters. Okay. It's very obvious who he's pandering to. A lot of South Asians have actually written think pieces on him and how they think he's okay, there's this one part of him where he talks about his heritage a lot, but then he's always It's just like it's very hard to describe unless you're from that community.
So having said all that,
but my brother was like, and then he had that whole thing, the kind of like the gray area Me Too situation, which was very controversial because some people felt like, well, it's not really a Me Too thing. Some people are just saying it was a bad date. So there's a lot of discussion and debate about that. So I know he turned a lot of women off. So his show, my brother was telling me, he's like, no, it's actually really good. He goes, I don't like him either.
This
but
is his
show,
latest Netflix special.
His latest
Netflix.
What is it called? Netflix. What's called? The show is called
Leah.
Right now. Yeah. So I have to say that overall I did like it, and I'll tell you what I'll tell you what parts I liked, and I was gonna say, like, give you examples of why I think he's performing for the white audiences. Okay, so I liked how he started the show. I'm glad that he brought up the whole situation that had, the Babe article about the date that he went on with this woman and how she felt like she was being taken advantage of. So I thought it was interesting that he talked about that, and I liked that he was very self-reflective in the show. And then I love when he started talking about white people and this woke culture, because I have talked about this
on this show
all the time. And because it's true. Yeah. It's like you watch a lot. When Black Panther came out, I had so many white friends just telling me, tweeting about how they were going to Black Panther, taking pictures of themselves at Black Panther. And it's just kind of like, okay, when you watch the movie Cats, tweet about that. You don't have to always tell me that you're watching a movie with black people in it. Yeah. It's like, it is totally true, and it's kind of exhaustive at some point, and it's kind of patronizing at a certain point. And so I know a lot of woke white people mean well. I'd rather have a woke white person. Woke. No, be woke. I mean, be a sensitive person. But you don't have to always tell everybody how cool you are and how you like hip hop. I've told that to my husband. I'm like, oh yeah, white people always have to tell us how much they like hip hop.
So
how many times?
You don't want to go to our hip hop Black Panther party this weekend that Ben and I are having. You don't want to go?
Yeah, man.
Like, come
we
on.
invited you.
It's like, no, it was funny. I thought that part was really funny, and how like a lot of woke white people are playing this like woke Olympics, so I thought that was very funny. I thought it was interesting how he brought up R. Kelly, which is, obviously something we talk a lot about, and how, he in his previous shows, he talked about R. Kelly. I like that because one of the things I do like about him is that he kind of talks about his family a lot. And then this is where it's like, it gets a little tricky for me, because it's like, he's talking about his cousin and he calls him Harris. It's actually Horace. Okay. So it's like, why do you have to like act like you can't pronounce these names right, or pronounce it like a South Asian would? I mean, I know he was raised in Georgia, so it's a little different, because being a South Asian growing up in the 70s, it was very few of us, but I grew up in Chicago, the Chicago area, so we had all these South Asian friends. But I know that kid's name is not Harris, okay? So I'm just like, oh my God. So that made me cringe. And then he starts talking about, his parents, and how, like, he's telling everybody that you should see the people that you love. And he's like, I don't see, how we don't see our parents in a year. And I'm like, are you seriously? Your parents are in your show.
Okay, wait. Time out. This started out as your 2 thumbs up for the guy.
No, but this is what I'm saying. This is what made me like, okay, he's acting like he's a wasp that hates his family. It doesn't, and I'm like, he's not like that. Because his parents were on the show. They're actually prominent characters on the show. And I'm like, okay, maybe he doesn't see his family that much because they live in Georgia, or like, wherever southern state he's from. But I was like, he made it sound like he was so removed. And anybody that's like from an immigrant family, your parents are always in your face. And I mean, you're talking to them all the time. I'm talking to other people's parents all the time. And I know everybody's family is probably different, but I was like, come on, you put your parents in your show. You don't see them once a year. So I'm like, oh, don't pretend this is like you hate your family and you never see them, because it's
3 times a year.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know.
Yeah,
I'm saying you're Jewish. You know that you guys are always talking to your mom, so it's like
my mom,
the stereotype, you know what I mean? It's
but you're absolutely correct. My mom, may she rest in peace.
Yeah. You probably talk to her a lot more than once a year.
Well, oh God, I talk to my mother every day.
I know.
Okay.
That's what I'm saying. So I felt like that, like he's like, I'm like, I don't believe that you don't talk to your parents. You don't have that relationship. And that's one of the things, but I'm just saying those are the little like tweaky things, but he kind of redeemed himself a little on that show for me.
Yeah. All right. So
and then he
time
talked
out.
about Indians too, of
Yeah.
being not on TV and stuff. And he's like, God.
So overall, you say to people, watch this.
I would say watch
okay.
it,
All
even
right.
if you don't like him, because that's what my brother told me. He kind of forced me to watch it. So.
Well, I urge everybody to watch it as well. And there's some very moving. I'll just leave it at this. Some very moving parts when he's talking about his grandmother who has Alzheimer's.
Yeah, that was very touching.
Very moving. Anybody who's dealt with a person, an older relative, a mother, a grandmother, or grandfather, etc., with Alzheimer's and dementia can really relate. I can tell you that for my own personal feelings. I'm going to tell you this weekend I'm going to see Crawl. All right, that's what I'm going to go see.
I don't know why you want to see that. I want to see the Farewell, like we talked about.
That Farewell opens in Chicago
today, I think.
Yes. And so I'll see it next week. Anyway, we have to take a break. Ramana Hussain is her name. Every Friday on our show, Ramana Hussain, editor from the Chicago Sun-Times. Ramana, thanks for coming on again.
Thank you.
All right, that's Ramana. I'm Ben. We'll be right back after this.
The Ben Joravsky Show is supported by the Northwestern Summer Writers Conference. Now in its 15th year, the 3-day conference held in Chicago features a diverse array of workshops, speakers, discussions, and readings. Learn more at sps.northwestern.edu/writers.
Did you know that 40% of the people in Illinois opt to be cremated? Well, it's true. And Chicagoland Cremation Options honors their wishes by providing cremation services directly to the general public. Chicagoland Cremation Options provides an affordable, ethical, and easy cremation arrangement, whether in person or online. Save thousands and streamline the process by going directly to Chicagoland Cremation Options. It's a family-owned business operated by my good friend, Douglas Klein. Here's how you reach them. ChicagolandCremationOptions.com. One more time, ChicagolandCremationOptions.com.
All right, everybody. Hour number 2 of your Ben Joravsky Show for Friday. How's it going, Sergio? July 19th is moments away. But before we get into that, we would like to thank the following unions once again for jumping on board and helping bring back our program. First up, the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers, Local 126 and District 8, the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 9, and the International Union of Operating Engineers, Local 150. A giant thank you to those unions for jumping on board. And, of course, today's program is brought to you by our good friends at the Chicago Federation of Labor. Hour number 2, let's go. Thank goodness it is Friday, July 19th. And live from the Chicago Sun-Times Chicago Reader Studio on Racine Avenue, this is the Ben Joravsky Show. In this hour of the program, we welcome back to Front Smart and host of the Fight podcast, Sergio Vicente. And it's the Ben Joravsky Show debut. Hope the studio looks good. Of criminal defense attorney Tony Thefford. I can talk. And now your host, Chicago Reader columnist Ben Joravsky.
Yes, indeed. DeFrance and Sergio are in the studio. They did such a good job together the last time they didn't even know each other. They just met on my show. I said, come back together next time. So they're here sitting there ready to go. Before we bring them on, D, you got an update for me?
Absolutely, I do. First up, right now, posted on both Ben Joravsky Show Facebook and Twitter pages. It's the latest Chicago Reader column from our very own Ben Joravsky. This article is titled, President Polluter. Ben, tell everyone what they'll learn when reading your latest story.
I urge absolutely everyone after the show to read this story. It is about the EPA employees here from Chicago who are leading the fight against Donald Trump's rollback of pollution regulations that protect us from damage to our environment. We're facing like an existential threat, folks, with climate change, and the president wants to pretend like it doesn't exist. It's a hoax. Anyway, it tells the story of one particularly brave EPA employee here in the Chicago office who did a very prominent protest against Andrew Wheeler when she was in Washington to receive an award for the work she's done. Lorene Targos from Chicago did the protest. The picture's right there. Probably see the picture of her on our Facebook page, because that's the picture we use in the illustration in the reader. And I got to tell you, the EPA employees, in my humble opinion, they're some brave people. They are just speaking directly. Not just, everybody's like, it's easy for me. I'm not employed by Donald John Trump. I don't work for Donald John Trump. I can say what I want about Donald John Trump. But Lorene works for the Environmental Protection Agency, and Nicole Contello, who's been on this show before, D, you know her. Mm-hmm. I quote her in the story as well. And these are two brave EPA employees who are standing up for what they think is really important, and that is the environment. So I urge absolutely everybody to read it and support these EPA employees. Donald Trump is going after their union big time.
So there you go. Go check it out on both Ben Joravsky Show Facebook and Twitter pages at Benny J Show, BENNY, the letter J Show, the ChicagoReader.com. But hey, read it after you listen to this program, all right? We got great guests coming up, so don't go away here. On to our next update. And guys, maybe it's just me, but I find stories involving President Donald Trump and hip-hop artists fascinating. We had the Kanye West thing. You all remember that, right?
Yeah.
Well, Trump said, this comes from The Guardian, by the way. Trump said during his comments to reporters in the Oval Office that the White House is trying to get rapper A$AP Rocky, that's $A$AP Rocky. You knew that, right, Ben?
Yeah, of course.
Big fan. What's your favorite song from A$AP Rocky?
Rocky Raccoon.
Oh, yeah. He loves that one. Mine, too. Yeah. The rapper has been held by Swedish authorities for more than 2 weeks for an alleged aggravated assault in Stockholm, but prosecutors are still weighing whether to formally charge him. So we have audio here from Donald Trump. Hopefully it'll sound okay. If not, I can read the quote.
Here we got to ask Sergio and DeFrance to weigh in on this, because I know absolutely nothing about this, so get ready.
Oh, go. Man, we had him fooled, man. Rocky Raccoon.
That's a Beatles song, by the way.
Blew your cover.
Yeah, I know.
A$AP Rocky is a situation in Sweden. Sweden's a great country. They're friends of mine, the leadership, and we are going to be we'll be talking to them. We've already started. And many members of the African-American community have called me, friends of mine, and said, could you help? So I personally don't know A$AP Rocky, but I can tell you that he has tremendous support from the African-American community in this country. And when I say African-American, I think I can really say from everybody in this country, because we're all one. I have been called by so many people asking me to help A$AP Rocky. Actually, the one who knew about A$AP Rocky was our First Lady, right? And she was telling me about, can you help A$AP Rocky? Do you want to give a little statement on that? You feel,
hot damn, what a time to be alive.
I'll tell you what, all of a sudden he's worried. He just blasted, 4 I can't even get the words out. Congresswomen of color, and now he's suddenly worried about what the African Americans, in this country feel about. That's pretty amazing, man. That guy, it's unreal. So anyway, Sergio Vicente, I always turn to you for advice, for counsel, for how people should deal with Donald John Trump, because you spend so much of your time following wrestling and boxing, and you have your own podcast, the Fight Podcast. So what is your response to how people should deal with what he just said?
Well, first of all, free Flacco, okay? A$AP is a young individual, who is... yes, he's a rapper. Yes, he has said some things in the past that people aren't very happy with in the community, because pretty much he said at one point in time, look, I'm not an activist. I don't care who I'm the guy who, I'm about having fun, talk about what I'm talking about, having fun with girls, partying or whatever. So he's in a situation in Sweden right now where essentially he was protecting himself. He was being harassed consistently for hours by an individual. They protected themselves, and now the Swedish authority, and realistically, the only reason that the Swedish authorities even knew about it is because somebody actually put it on their social media page. So they said after his concert, hey, do us a favor. When you come, we just want to talk to you about it. He said, fine. After his concert, he went to go, and ever since then, they literally grabbed him, locked him up for 6 hours without giving him anything but water. And it's, again, he's been there forever, since, again, 2 weeks now or whatever that is the case. A lot of hip hop artists at this point in time are not, they're essentially boycotting going out there. But this government is a government that has been known to be a very racist government. This is a government over there that has also been known to, they have recently said they don't want hip hop here. This is not what we want. So they're trying to make an example of A$AP Rocky. Now, talking about your boy, Trumpito, you know.
My boy. Yeah.
He's somebody who, and honestly, the only reason he even knows about it is because Kim Kardashian and Kanye West recently went to him and said, hey, this is something that, you know, free A$AP, right? If we don't see what he's doing, this is a ploy. All he's trying to do is, look, black people, we're here for you guys. You know, this is it. You know, I'm trying to
Wait, is that your Trump imitation?
Oh man, yeah. Come on, everyone, we're here. You know, let's do it. He believes that this is going to ingratiate himself with the black and brown community, especially after he just got done torching us and telling, you know, 4 congresswomen, 3 of which were born here, one of which has been here since she was 10 years old, one of which, whom, for instance, has been an American citizen longer than his wife, which a lot of people, I don't understand why we don't know. And now you're trying to, now we're cool because I'm here for the African-American community. This is phenomenal. Like, nah, bro, we know what we're doing. You're trying to get votes. So how should we attack this?
Yeah.
Facts. Do not allow him. Don't allow him off the hook. When he does this, look, if you can get A$AP out, thank you. We're not forgetting the rest of the litany of things that you've done in the past. We're just not going to have that happen.
It goes back to his, like, I have no racist bone in my body. And so we're going to try to help a black man who's going through the same thing that other black people in other countries. I think we often try to isolate that what's going on in America in which black and brown bodies are being imprisoned is the same thing that's going on all over the world. So him and his, again, another like marketing scheme of I care about the black folks, especially this high profile individual. And it's coming from Kanye because Kanye has done a lot of work with A$AP Rocky and he's probably apolitical up until this point. He will at some point have to speak about his experiences.
You talk about A$AP?
A$AP, yeah. And his language, like Sergio said, a lot of his language was simply stating that the Michael Jordan type of response when it comes to things that are happening in black and brown community.
Yeah, he's my boy.
Yeah, I'm in.
That is my boy.
That is my boy.
6. I'm just gonna say this.
You got on a hat too.
6.
I was gonna mention that. We're not gonna try to talk about sports as much, but yeah, his comments were around that he lives in LA. He's an artist who has a lot of money. The things that are happening in this country, in Ferguson and wherever, don't really speak to the life that I'm currently living, and I don't need to speak on it because I don't experience those things. And it's wild for him to make that statement knowing that he is a cis black man living in America and his family are black people who live in America. And the things that it doesn't necessarily have to happen to you for you to be mindful and understanding of what's going on and have a voice about the things that are happening to the people who look like you. So.
Well, do you think when Donald Trump does something like this is the first time I've heard about this. Dennis just unveiled this one. So follow me on this one. He has the rally in South Carolina 2 days ago, and the crowd starts chanting "Send her back." And then there's some blowback on that. Yesterday, he has some statements to the press. We could play all this stuff for you guys to hear, where he said, "I didn't approve of it. I didn't." I talked really fast to try to stop them from doing it. We can time it, and you guys can comment on that, how much time he allowed to have. And then today, he rolled back the rollback, where at the same, I think it was probably the same press conference with A$AP Rocky, he mentioned that those are fine, good people. At the rally, and stopped criticizing them, and then he started bashing Omar again, Congresswoman Omar. And then he's like, A$AP Rocky, but all my African-American friends, like who are his African-American friends, are telling me about A$AP Rocky. So what are we to make of this? You know what I mean? Like, do you think he's actually convincing anybody in America that he is a tolerant human being because he's speaking out for A$AP Rocky?
Absolutely not. Let me rephrase that. Individuals who, I don't want to say people who are just educated. I mean, if we look at, for instance, the Gallup polls that are going on, his base, 100%, I believe, probably believes him. His base has already stated that at the end of the day, they don't believe anybody but Donald Trump. So if he is saying something, his base is going to bite. 90%, even after this past week, the Gallup poll just came out and it even said 90% of voting Republicans still support Donald Trump. Only 6% of Democrats at this point in time support Donald Trump. We also forget he lost the popular vote by 3 million votes. Here is the bigger issue that he is going to face. It's not the Republican. He has his base. The Democrats, we already know. What he wants to do is pretty much get those swings with the independent voters. Well, guess what? The independent voters have actually recently dropped as well in polling. So at this point in time right now, only 30% of independent voters support Donald Trump. That is an issue. If we actually look back and think about if anybody who is currently running at this point in time, if we actually looked at it and said, yo, independent voters, you're polling at 30%, would you be looking to primary them? That's what we're looking at right now. So do I believe that people are falling for this? Do I believe people are? No. We all know what it is. He literally contradicts himself in the same sentence. In the exact same sentence, he goes back and forth.
It's all marketing. It's all propaganda. And like Sergio said, his base will never not follow. I don't even think it reminds me of things like the farming bills, the 9/11 bills, and what just core people are subgroups of. What it will take in order for them to say, I don't want to vote. And there's going to be nothing because they want to uphold white supremacists like dominance in this country and power in this country. So even if you go against everything that I stand for, my existence, how my family feeds themselves, profit, capitalism, like even if that does not align, I'm still going to vote for you because you're a white man who is trying to uphold having this country be predominantly held by and ran by white people and not overpopulated by people who don't look like me. So I'm very curious to know who are the 30% of these swing voters. Who were they up until this point of not voting for Donald Trump? And so it would be very curious to see, like, is it, like you said, is it the educated population who thought Donald Trump was gonna come in and help them with taxes? Was it some of the very conservative women votes who were just like, hey, we can't be too liberal? Who is the 30%? And at this point, I don't know what it will take for a Democratic person to come in and run and for them to swing towards our way. But I don't know because he's done so much. Mm-hmm. Like, what is going to be the point where everyone says, okay, I can't because he's already done enough?
I me personally, I believe it's, for instance, like you have individuals who were staunch conservatives, like, for instance, Congressperson like Justin Amash. Mm-hmm. So Justin Amash is one of the individuals one of the only Republicans that has really been pushed out of the Republican Party and now is a registered independent. Mm-hmm. So because of the way he has from the congressman, yes, from their 3rd district. Mm-hmm. So he's someone who I believe that I think the independent vote are people who were conservatives are saying, hey, we cannot get down with this. Mm-hmm. They're the ones who have not that much, a little bit of empathy for individuals. And they realize that, look, this is a big problem. Mm-hmm.
It is. And it's a long-term thing too. I think what they're seeing is if we don't support him, then this party will never, ever, ever be in power again. Mm-hmm. And so if we relinquish, and I take a stance with someone who is in the middle or very far left, then where am I at in this point when it comes 8 years from now, in which we can't elect and it's ran by both the House and the Senate, and we have no place to go? Like, the people who are getting older and starting to vote have nothing in agreement with them, and their people are dying, and their group who always will support them. If I lean away from them now, where will I be in 4, 8, 12, the next 20 years? Or where's our party gonna go? And so they're highly concerned, and so I'm gonna be loyal as I can be, regardless. It's the long run for them.
Absolutely.
All right, now let me ask you this, to Franz. I had a little joke with this on the show. One day I opened a segment by saying, I'm optimistic. I do not believe, this is right after Donald Trump with the weekend with the tweets. This has just dominated the conversation all week. So I said, I'm optimistic. There's no way that this country, despite its pasts, despite the Civil War, despite slavery, despite Jim Crow, despite all these things, there's no way that this country will elect in the 21st century a man who's so blatantly racist as Donald Trump. I do not believe that. And then the next day I open and I'm like, oh my God, he knows what he's doing. This country's going to fall for it. So where do you fall in that spectrum? Do you have optimism to believe that this country will reject the blatant, obvious racism of Donald John Trump, or do you think this country, the silent majority is saying to itself, yeah, man, he speaks for me. I'm going to vote for DJT. Where do you think it's going?
It's almost like statistics in which, like, Donald Trump is the null, right? Like, when we think of statistics, like, Donald Trump is the null. It's everything that they've ever wanted, and, like, obviously he could have been smarter and still just as racist. But I'm not optimistic at all, because I really think this country cares more about upholding white supremacy and not relinquishing power and allowing people of color to have power in this country. And it's so wild to me that people really they find no ways to be able to understand the benefits of people coming into power and reshaping this country. Because again, it goes back to, how did you ever view this country as a great place when so many lives were destroyed or continue to be destroyed? People can't eat, people don't have health care. Like, how can you look at and live in a society every single day and forget about people are suffering and say that this is a great place to live because you as a singular individual are okay and your family is okay? So I'm not optimistic. Right. I can see another 4 years and not be surprised. And I think activists are preparing for, like, we're doing our jobs to make sure that it doesn't happen so that we can reject, but also being aware that even if whoever comes into power next, the fight still needs to happen. It's not like, and I think AOC said it, like, even like, we know he's racist, and whoever comes in after, it doesn't remove all the things that are still going on in this country that we need to fix and continue to work to fight against.
Optimist or pessimist?
If I look at the polling, which obviously all of us know we can't really base anything on, I would say I'm optimistic that he should get out of here. But I'll be very honest with you. I am a bit pessimistic, because at the end of the day, with, the criminal in chief, racism isn't the bug, it's the feature. And that's what a lot of us have to understand. It's the feature. That is what we're sitting there. That is what they're putting out there. They're not color coding it. What was it? Tennessee or Mississippi recently? They had they gave a day to one of the original grand wizards or whatever, the KKK. Mm-hmm. This is something that is currently happening in our country. And the fact that he feels comfortable sitting there saying, to sit there and literally say, hey, you 4 black and brown women, go back to where you came from. Mm-hmm. Yo, bro, one of them is from your borough. What are you talking about? Yeah. She's literally from the exact same borough that he's from. Yeah. And one thing that people are saying that, Lindsey Graham, whom I don't know if Donald Trump has a dog or a pet. I think that is the closest thing that he has to a pet is Lindsey Graham. Yeah. So Lindsey. One thing that he says that, if Ilhan Omar went out there and actually, if she's Somali, that's fine. But if she had a, Make America Great Again hat on and she supported him, that'll be fine. The issue is that she doesn't agree with Donald Trump. Well, James Baldwin years ago said this. He said, I love America more than any other country in this world. And exactly for this reason, I insist on the right to criticize her perpetually. That is what these women are doing. We love this country. So what we're going to sit there and do is sit there and hold our country to a specific standard. And that's not what they want. That is the issue at hand. So we have to continue fighting. We have to continue doing what we're doing now, attempting to speak truth to power, That is what people have to do. We need more individuals like the squad. People don't like calling, I like it, whatever. They're the squad, and that's a great thing. They're out here. The Justice Democrats that are out there working, the people doing different things. We need individuals like this who are not afraid to stand up to power. We don't need more Nancy Pelosi's. We don't need more Chuck Schumers of the world that are going to sit here and literally give this man every little thing that he wants in order to keep themselves in power. That is an issue. We want more individuals, real Americans, because that's the thing. What we're starting to see now, Ilhan Omar, what a beautiful individual. You're looking at someone, when I see her with her hijab on, when I see her sitting here speaking, literally, I am the American dream. I am somebody who came from somewhere else, worked my butt off, and now I'm sitting here trying to make this a better country for everyone because she loves this country. That's what we need more of. And honestly, I'm proud that those women, like I said, not all heroes wear capes. Those are superheroes.
Not all heroes wear capes. DeFrance, since the last time you guys were on the show, I don't think the debates had happened, had they? You were before the debates.
We were like, no. We were here. There was a debate the day before because, there were like 13 of them.
Yeah.
We came the day after one debate, but not the rest of the debates.
So, is there anything about where the Democratic candidates are that leaves you excited? Are there any of these candidates that have you intrigued?
I told you I'm always a Elizabeth Warren fan.
That hasn't changed.
That hasn't. I don't think it will ever change. I'm just again thinking of how do we always basketball. It's a win or a loss. And how do we actually win this election to remove him from power, to actually put in some policies in place, or that we're talking about climate change, right? And that's a very local and global thing. Because it's not only, we know that Little Village is one of the places where people have the highest rate of asthma. And we think about environmental issues are always racial issues. They're never isolated incidents of where people who have the most environmental harm done against them is often in Black and brown neighborhoods. And so people who have to have that lens of understanding that a lot of the problems that are happening in America are racial. And if you don't state that very clearly in your politics, in your policies, in the ways in which that you speak, I can't really listen to you. I'm almost tone deaf to it. Because again, you're trying to be in that neutral ground like Nancy Pelosi, in which you're not even quick fixes, but just speak about it and not really try to make change. And we're at that point in society today where we need to start the engine going. Okay. We don't have time to speak on it. We need to do things. And I had a conversation probably about six months ago of how long this does it take to make changes. Mm-hmm. And we often think, I think in communities of color, we think everything has to be slow. That change is gonna come. We gotta wait for it, wait our time, wait till we have the resources, wait till everything's all already mapped out and already done. And now it's like we got to be on the attack. We have to really push things forward and have people in leadership who are going to be about, hey, here's my bill today. Let's vote on it and make some changes. And if not, then nothing will ever happen and we'll always be neutral. And that's not what this society needs, and that's not how we move forward in ways in which that we can make this America a better place, a safe space in which people can live happily, safely, without having to think about that, hey, there are so many injustices going against me, and there's not a way that I can actually survive here because people don't want me to.
All right. So whenever you are on the show, I find myself having to defend Michael Jordan under assault. I'll just say this is Sergio 6. How many championships have you brought to Chicago, Sergio? And he's silence there. And the Nancy Pelosi. So I'm often forced to defend Nancy Pelosi when I'm on the show because many of my guests are sort of from the leftist persuasion that come on this show. And I always defend Nancy Pelosi by saying this. Nancy Pelosi is trying to keep together a coalition of people who basically don't agree with one another, who come from separate neighborhoods. They have separate worldviews. They have some are afraid of the things that the other people are pushing for. So if a lot of voters, like, they hear black people saying that we can't wait any longer, they get nervous. And this has been going back since Martin Luther King was in jail. And he wrote the letter from Birmingham.
Correct.
You know, so and here's Nancy Pelosi in the middle of it all, trying to keep her Democratic Party together long enough to win the next election.
Is she, though? Is she?
No.
Seriously, think about it. The fact that she's going out here from the very beginning, the only reason Donald Trump felt emboldened enough to sit back and actually attack these 4 individuals is because Nancy Pelosi has been doing it nonstop.
She came
nonstop.
first.
Well, she was first. I wouldn't say nonstop, but she was
came first.
From the very beginning,
Yes.
she said anything, and whether it be jealousy, whatever it may be,
generational.
It doesn't matter. How are you possibly trying to keep the everything together when these 4 individuals haven't crushed Nancy Pelosi? All they've done is consistently said, these are the platforms that my constituents want. Mm-hmm. I am fighting for my constituents. And Nancy Pelosi is sitting there doing everything in her power to say, okay, prime example, what does America want? The majority of Americans have said, we want Donald Trump to be impeached. What does she say? She says, oh, I'm not going to do that. Well, guess what, Nancy? That's not what you have you there for. That's not your job. Your job is to sit there and actually do what your constituents ask you to do. Your constituents are asking you to do so. They are fighting against that. So the notion that she's actually sitting there trying to benefit us, and then again, I've said this before, let's look at her voting record. Let's look at what she's actually voted for. Recently, why was the reason that she actually attacked these 4 individuals to begin with? Mm-hmm. Because they refused to give Donald Trump $4.6 billion for his hate monument. Mm-hmm. She got bent out of shape about it. She's also been on record saying, hey, Donald Trump is good for business. So everyone, especially and again, I hate the fact that people think of it as an ageist thing or anything like that, because, hey, I'm a Bernie Sanders fan. So Bernie's been, if I look at his voting record throughout the line from the beginning of time, because he's probably that old. he has sit there,
ageism.
You know, but you know what? He has been consistent throughout. So again, when I'm looking at these things, only thing anybody could ever tell me is that, yo, she's a great fundraiser. Who cares?
We're trying to make change. We don't care about making money right now, and yeah, he felt comfortable because within our own party, and we act like you can't have conversations behind closed doors, in which if you're the leader of this party, then these conversations should have been
quote
had
unquote
privately. Because but you have to make time for those. You have to be ready to make changes within your own party, within yourself. And it's a lot of, and it's generational. There's some ageism in which people have been living in this society for so long, and that drastic changes for them is scary. Like I'm shook. I don't know if I can have that much change. And there are younger folks who are like, let's go. And so there is a meeting of the minds that needs to happen. And these conversations need not be had on Twitter, at press conferences. It should be had closed doors. And so we can talk about ways in which we can come together. And so the things that you're asking for and your people are asking for, and maybe some things that I'm trying to learn about, the same way, we can come to an agreement and get things done. Mm-hmm. And if not, then everyone's going to continue to view our party as this very weak party, and we can't get things done. And here we go, allowing Donald Trump to get shit done, because this party is going to be loyal, regardless if they don't care. It's like the conversations are probably had backdoor. Like, I don't really think this is a good one, but I think we're going to have to lose the mini battle on this one to win the war. Mm-hmm. And they're playing strategically while we're over here. We can't get it done because we care more about like these small little fights that we're trying to have, and it's like, no, we got to do stuff. So
that's DeFranz Smart. Sergio Vicente's in the studio as well. Before I let you go, Sergio, tell folks where they can follow your podcast, give all the information about you, and then the same for you, DeFranz.
You can find me on the Fight Podcast with host Sergio Vicente. We are on all podcasting platforms: Apple, or iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, SoundCloud. You could also find me at sageeatschicago.com. We do healthy meal prep and fitness mentoring, but with all the fight stuff, at the Fight Podcast on all social media platforms. And yes, check us out. We talk about all fight sports, breakdowns, interviews with top athletes, prospects, coaches, media personalities, and we break down all the fights. So,
and let's take a little shout out to Pernell Whitaker, passed away.
Shout out, yes.
One of the great boxers of the 80s, loved the man to death. He died too young, in my humble opinion.
55 years old.
55?
Yeah, 55 years old. Got a car accident. Yes, sir.
Great fighter. Had 2 fights stolen from Sergio.
Oscar De La Hoya, Julio Cesar Chavez. Yes.
He wasn't even born yet. He knows his stuff. 2 fights stolen from the man. A lot of courage in him. DeFrance Smart. I know we're not supposed to talk about sports when you're on the show, even though she's one of the greatest basketball players, in my humble opinion, from the city of Chicago in this century. But just briefly talk about pay equity. You mentioned that. I know it's probably a whole topic we should get into. I shouldn't do this when we're about to bring on Tony Tedford. But just you must have been inspired by the women, the national women's soccer team standing up for the rights to get paid equitably and fairly, right?
Absolutely. Pay them. They deserve it. They've done the work. They've won. There's nothing else you can say. If we're talking about production, we produce. And so pay me what I'm worth. And I was talking about it with a friend today in ways in which how can they get paid? Because very often, and we go back to the 9/11 bill, like we don't have the resources. We don't have the money for it. We can find the money, but what we need to do is make sure that once the money is in the pot, how can we go to make women's soccer, women's sports as marketed fairly as the men do? We create these fields of like recruiting and institutions in which people can be, I don't want to use the word bred, but training facilities that are top notch so that we can keep a pool of kids in soccer and sports that is marketed and has enough money the same way that they do for the men. The WNBA is looking at the same way. You make $35,000, $40,000 on a rookie salary. On the men's side, we're talking about $1.3 million on the low end. So it's more than just about like how we can find money, but how can we put other resources into the sport so that the women can be able to compete at the same level. And they don't, because they don't care. They don't care about women's sport. The women's WNBA team has had like 4 presidents. And so people actually trying to build women's sports up the way that they should be. And it starts at the ground level. AAU, presidents, marketing, social media, give us the same amount of funds so that we can produce at the same level so that people can get eyeballs on TV. We're not playing on 12 o'clock on Twitter. Like the WNBA plays on Twitter, a live stream. That is what their marketing scheme has been this year. How can we get more eyeballs on it? Let's put the games on live stream.
Yeah, I think there's an audience for it. I really do think there's an audience for
absolutely.
basketball.
The Houston Comets were amazing for 6 years.
Yeah.
We're talking about 6 championships. They won 6 in a row. And Houston was rocking. This was back in the Cheryl Swoop days, Tina Thompson's. Like we're talking about people who were at the top of their game.
But let me ask you this: you grew up playing basketball, or at least from junior high on, or middle school, whatever they call it here in the city of Chicago. And did you follow? Did you follow basketball? Why?
WNBA games?
Yes,
absolutely. That was the peak of '98. We're talking about the UConn women's basketball games being even more popular than the men at the time. We're talking about Pat Summitt in the Tennessee days. We're talking about people, Shamika Holsquall, Candace Parker dunking. So the peak of the game was during my time. And it's crazy that people have forgotten. And a lot of it goes to that they're just not getting the same visibility because people don't care. And I really hope that institutions like the NBA used to back a lot of the WNBA teams, and a lot of them have started not to because it's not profitable. And so the ways in which we just need a really good president, someone who cares about the game and is going to come and build it up and give it the resources that it needs, because we're really good and soccer is great. You don't even have to talk about them. Like the men can't compete.
And they definitely will not be visiting the White House. DeFran Smart, Sergio Vicente, my guest. Tony Thetford is sitting by. We're going to shift conversation on criminal justice issues in Cook County, city of Chicago, with a great criminal defense lawyer. We'll be right back after this.
Today's Ben Joravsky Show was brought to you in part by Chicago Architecture Center. Discover the breadth and majesty of Chicago's architecture on a Chicago Architecture Center bus tour. From bungalows to Bauhaus, our expert docents will share the fascinating stories behind our city's architecture. Book your tour at architecture.org/tours. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm actually on a bus tour right now. Oh my, look at that wonderful piece of architecture. Get a special discount for Illinois residents from July 15th to August 15th. All Illinois residents get 50% off select walking tours. Visit architecture.org/IL-resident.
Hey, everybody. What you're about to hear are the piano stylings of Jeff Manuel. Man, listen to Jeff go. Jeff Manuel has been playing piano around Chicago for years. He's played for conventions, for celebrities, played in basement bars with blues bands. He's played at prestigious social clubs, fine restaurants, and in the intimacy of private homes. Book Jeff Manuel at jeffemanuelpianist.com. Don't worry, I'll spell his name at the end of this commercial. You know what Chicago Magazine said? They said that Jeff Manuel is, quote, as comfortable with Chopin as he is with Cole Porter. He's excellent and his performance is joyous. He offers an elegant stream of compositions and interpretations that entertains the mind but won't hurt the ears. To hear more of Jeff Manuel's work and to book Jeff for your next event, go to jeffmanuelpianist.com. I'm going to spell it out for you, people. J-E-F-F. M as in Mary, A, N as in Nancy, UELPIANIST.com. Take it away, Jeff Manuel.
Today's Ben Joravsky Show is brought to you in part by Green Element Resale. It's located at 6241 North Broadway in Chicago. And guys, it's amazing. All right, listen to this. Furniture, appliances, lamps, books, clothes, electronics, more. It's a thrift shop, but it's the only thrift shop in Chicago that helps bring you the Ben Joravsky Show. So if you're ever on Broadway between Granville and Devon, check out Green Element Resale and tell them thank you, and go check out Green Element Resale, 6241 North Broadway, and find more information at greenelementresale.com. Green Element Resale, fantastic place. Go and save money. Welcome back to the Ben Joravsky Show, live from the Chicago Sun-Times.
Yes, indeed. We are live from the Chicago Sun-Times. DeFran Smart has left the building. Sergio Vicente has left the building. Tony Thetford is in the studio, criminal defense lawyer. Tony, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
And this is the first time Tony and I have met each other. Andy Grimm, who's been on the show several times, is the criminal courts reporter for the Chicago Sun-Times. Right. You got to have Tony on. You got to have Tony on. So I said, all right, stop bugging me, Andy. I'll have him on. So here we are.
I'm his, point person over there, and I send him in the right direction because I know where everything is over there and where the bodies are buried. So
good. Well, maybe we can uncover a few bodies here. All right. Since this is your first time on our show, just take a moment to introduce yourself. Tell folks a little bit, that's a few things they should know about you.
Sure. Tony Thetford. I've been a criminal defense lawyer for since 1997. Mm-hmm. I started with the Cook County Public Defender's Office, still the best job in the world. Loved it. Began my practice in 2005 and have been doing the same work I did as a public defender, but privately and for, paying clients since 2005. Right now, my business is Thetford Garber Law. I have a wonderful law partner, Sarah Garber, and we do both criminal defense and civil rights work. So We're very busy these days.
Yeah. And what's the difference between criminal defense and civil rights work?
Good question. Civil rights work is, well, let's be clear. There are two types of cases in general in the court system. There are criminal cases and there are civil cases. Civil rights, though, specifically has to do with a governmental violation of a constitutional right. So more specifically, it's police brutality, false arrest, wrongful conviction, that sort of work. But it actually spans more than that. But in terms of what most of us are familiar with, those types of cases that involve governmental intrusion on private citizens. So,
okay, now this is an interesting thing, one of my favorite topics that we're heading right into. Generally, when people talk about civil rights law, people assume that it's black people
marching in the streets.
Marching in the streets. But you're talking about civil rights, constitutional rights that we have from unwarranted government intrusion into our lives. And it's very interesting, Tony, that when somebody like Donald John Trump, for instance, is the subject of an investigation by the federal government, all of a sudden he's talking about his civil rights and his rights when a Chicago police officer is accused of shooting somebody. All of a sudden, he or she is talking about his or her civil rights. So everybody has civil rights. You get what I'm saying? But we just tend to view it in the political spectrum of the United States as something like black people have. Do you follow what I just said?
Well, also, Trump claimed that the Gang of Four were being racist towards him. So he just gloms onto anything that appears to be whatever comes to his head first and shoots out of his mouth. But does he have civil rights that can be violated? Sure. Have they been violated based on anything that we've seen? I think it's the other way around. But it's one of those things that I get calls all the time when people believe that it's a civil rights violation if they go into Target, for instance, and the cashier's rude to them. So we sift through a lot of those sort of things, but it is very specifically the defendant would be the government, City of Chicago, Chicago Police Department, the county, the state, the federal government can be sued under various theories. But we do get the opportunity to represent people of color who oftentimes don't know that they have a right that was violated. When I first started practicing law in this town, I worked as a public defender, but over when Robert Taylor homes were still standing. And my clients often didn't know that they couldn't just be stopped. They didn't know that they had a right to remain silent. They didn't know that being pushed around and beat up by police officers was a violation of the law. And so it was the basic. I lived under a different constitution than my clients lived under because they had no concept, not because they were dumb, but because the circumstances of their existence dictated what they understood. And the circumstances of their existence, oftentimes, they were so disenfranchised and so cast aside and so marginalized that they didn't realize they had the same rights as me. So one of the things that makes me happy, even if I'm not making money off of cases, is simply to educate folks on what their rights are. And that's an ongoing mission. And I think my responsibility as someone who was fortunate enough to become the lawyer that I wanted to be when I was a kid. So that sort of thing.
And could you ever see yourself working, like, for instance, as Jason Van Dyke's lawyer? So many lawyers come on the show and tell me, Ben, you got to be able to argue both sides of any case if you're a good lawyer. Could you see yourself doing something like that?
Yes. And I'll tell you why. When we get to the point as criminal defense lawyers where we place ourselves in front of the cause, and again, I don't have to take a case I don't want to take, but I wouldn't take Van Dyke's case if I had personal feelings that would interfere with the rigorous defense. Okay. Would I have taken Jason Van Dyke's case? Probably not. But have I taken cases of people who are deemed to be deplorable or horrible? Yes, I have. I've won many of those cases because the truth often is not the things that are published in the paper or that people popularly believe. Van Dyke is different. Again, we saw what happened there. I was happy with the trial outcome. I thought it was the right outcome. I was unhappy with the sentencing. The judge who sentenced him, I have a great deal of respect for. He's a good man. He's a smart judge. But again, the Van Dyke piece, to me, was a reminder to those of us who believe that power can be held accountable, that maybe not. And in Van Dyke's case, I think he got a kiss based on murdering a boy in the street. And I think he got a very reasonable sentence based on what he in fact was found guilty of, and the message that that jury sent by finding him guilty of each of those counts in terms of each bullet. So that remains disappointing to me. But as a lawyer, I'm happy that his lawyer was able to get him reasonable treatment.
Yeah.
So I, it's back and forth for me.
Well, that reminds me, I've used this line many times on the show. Dave Chappelle has a very funny bit. The comedian Dave Chappelle has a very funny bit. He's talking about Michael Richards, who was on Kramer, and he was the guy who had that breakdown on stage. Right. And one time, David Chappelle, you could find this on YouTube, he's on stage, at the very stage where Michael Richards had the breakdown. Right. It started, venting the N-word like crazy. And his career was never the same after that. And so David Chappelle looks around the stage, and in his own style, he says, I have two thoughts when I'm on here and I'm thinking about Michael Richards. He's like, 20% of me is a black man who's offended by it. But the other 80% is comedian. And I'm like, Michael, it didn't work. The bit didn't work. The next one will work. And I thought that was a very humane way to treat a fellow performer who had really bombed out. And when I'm listening to you, I'm reminded, because you have two aspects. One is just a citizen of Chicago who was outraged by the shooting of Laquan McDonald. The other is a lawyer. Go, hey, I think the guy's name is Herbert, is the lawyer.
Dan Herbert.
Hey, Herbert, you did a pretty good job. You got your boy off.
Right. He did a good job. And again, it's we win cases all the time where I'm hoping that client doesn't appear in my neighborhood, right? It's just the truth, right? But I am honored and proud of the work that we do as criminal defense attorneys, because again, we get to stand with the unpopular, and there's honor in that. And we have a young lady who came to work for our office this summer, and she's an undergraduate student. She was involved in a recent case. How can you defend someone that you believe or might know is guilty? First of all, I don't know if someone's guilty unless they tell me. I tell people that all the time, or unless I saw it on video, and even doing that, I don't know that for sure. But that's not the analysis. I would be dishonored if I didn't do everything that I could do for that client, because it's not about me. If they hire me or bring me in to defend their rights, they have a right in this country to a full and fair trial, full and fair representation, vigorous representation. And if I do anything short of that, I would never be able to sleep. I've not missed a day of sleep since I've been practicing, because I keep that foremost. And it's not just me. I realize I'm sitting here, but the lawyers that I know, these men and women who I'm honored to work with, most of us feel the same way. There's some exceptions. The thing that happened, and this is on the R. Kelly piece.
Okay.
The thing R. Kelly's, one of his former lawyers, said about him back in February when this case was charged, and talked about conversations that he had with R. Kelly, and he knew he was guilty, and he tried to get him treatment and do all of those things. Frankly, that was one of the most shameful episodes I've heard of from a criminal defense lawyer, and this particular lawyer is outstanding. He was a god to many of us, and I don't know what the motivation was, but we can't do our jobs if our clients can't trust us with their secrets, and we don't get to have an opinion about our client's guilt or innocence. I don't know if you remember years ago, before he died, Johnny Cochran never gave an opinion on OJ. Never did it.
Yeah.
He never did it. Not because he was sitting on something, because that was his job, his responsibility.
Yeah.
And so whoever we represent, be it someone who everyone's deeming guilty, R. Kelly at this point, we hold on to those confidences, and more importantly, we hold on to our opinions, because if we have an opinion, those who hear us may believe that that's what our client told us.
Yeah.
And so, we're dealing with a powder keg here, and we've got to be careful. And so, again, regardless of what's happening with Kelly, it's certainly not fair if one of his prior lawyers,
All right, we'll talk about R. Kelly. Let's talk R. Kelly and compare him to Jeffrey Epstein. Mary Mitchell wrote a column the other day in the Chicago Sun-Times, very interesting column, where she was doing a pretty much obvious comparison about how these very prominent, successful, wealthy people have done very well, if you will. I'm just boiling it down in our criminal justice system. R. Kelly was acquitted back in 2008. The evidence was pretty strong against him. And Jeffrey Epstein, he wasn't acquitted, I think around the same time, but man, what a slap on the wrist he got. So let's talk about that a little bit. What is the obvious conclusion is that if you're wealthy, the system works for you.
Yeah. Let me say this. I mentioned a moment ago one of R. Kelly's lawyers. I worked with the other R. Kelly lawyer at the time of that trial back in 2008. Sam Adam and I worked together for years in the same space. I was not involved in that case, but again, Sam Adam Jr. is an excellent lawyer, and he ended up being sort of lead attorney in that case. That was a weak case. People keep suggesting that somehow he got off. That was the only conclusion a jury could have reached. They did not have the alleged victim in that video. So without that clarification as to who that was in the video or some determination of that should have been a not guilty. And I'm not saying it's an easy case. And I certainly, from the outside looking in, know what those lawyers did and how hard they worked to get to that result. But there was no, conversation with or deal with some people in power in order to get R. Kelly favorable treatment. The government had a hard time putting that case together. That's not the case now. They've got him coming and going in terms of how they've charged him in Cook County, how the feds have charged him both here and in New York. It would be a miracle if he were able to escape all of those charges. Epstein is different. With the Epstein piece, he knew powerful people. He was able to lean on those people in order to get favorable treatment. His outcome back in 2013 had everything to do with our former Secretary of Labor and the deal that he made with him directly down in Florida when he was the U.S. attorney in that district. So it's easy to compare the fact that both men are wealthy, but the circumstances of those acquittals are completely different. And again, Epstein was not acquitted back in 2013.
28. I think it was 2008.
Was it 2008?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. I think it was Bush was the president of the United States when it went down. But anyway, go ahead. I cut you off.
He was not acquitted. He just got a favorable plea deal.
Yes.
Which was an amazing plea deal based on those allegations. I which I was his lawyer, I would have got a huge bonus. So they're different circumstances.
Well, and not only did he get the amazing plea deal, Tony, but I don't know if you saw this one. After he had served his time, and I have that in quotes because he was allowed to leave jail every day, but that's called an easy sentence. But after he served his sentence, there was a court proceeding in New York where the New York had to determine how much of a sex offender he was. There's a ranking system. I wasn't aware of this. I read the article. There's a ranking system, and so the higher your rank, the more regulations you have to abide, more prohibitions on your movements. The district attorney the federal prosecutor from New York, serving under Vance in New York, went and argued for leniency. For Epstein. And the judge was so surprised. I've never heard any attorney, so he got it. It was the favorable, that was like 2011, I want to say. So these favorable behavior by the prosecutors continued for him.
Well, I mean, what is the consistency there, though? In this country, and it starts from the White House on down, the reason that Trump is even in power because we credited him for being financially successful. So it makes you look different. He's sanitized. Epstein was different from everyone else because he was wealthy. And because he was wealthy, he got different consideration from the same people that if he were poor or if he were brown would have been throwing a book at him. And there's no other way around that. I mean, the young lady who was here a few moments ago.
DeFrance.
talked about the core of all of these issues often has to do with race. And we have to call it that in order to ever change that. What happened to Epstein had to do with him being wealthy and white. And so, yeah, you get these same prosecutors who would throw the book at a person for a minor offense, begging for leniency for this man. It blows my mind. But unfortunately, we see it all the time.
Now, in my opinion, I have no proof. So I'm going to say this up front. I have no proof of this. But when I read these stories, Tony, and I read about the leniency, my first instinct, this is probably the guy who's been covering Chicago politics for a long time. Right. So correct me. Feel free to vigorously disagree with me. A call was made. That's my first instinct. Right. Somebody powerful called somebody in the position of authority in the criminal justice system and said, hey, go to bat for this guy. That's my instinct. What's your thoughts?
I bet we could track the donations that Epstein gave to various politicians. And I understand it's not just Republican politicians, it's also Democratic politicians with Epstein. But I bet we can track those donations and contributions over the years so that when the call needed to be made, people listened. It's as simple as that. If you can buy politics in this country, you buy influence, you can buy leniency. And so it doesn't happen with a one-shot deal when someone goes in with a bag of money and drops it off on someone's desk. It's calling in a favor. And what he was probably told was that, yeah, you're going to have to do a little bit of time, but we'll make it easier on you. We'll let you come and go every day and keep making your fortune and sleep here at night, possibly. And when you get to New York, instead of having to register under the terms that someone who's pled guilty to what you pled guilty to typically would be subjected to, we're going to make it more palatable for you. So, yeah, it's about money. It's about influence. It's about all of those things that we know are trite and we keep hearing every day. The problem is, and certainly with the behavior of this president, we've gotten to a point where we've accepted it. And that, to me, is the part that is...
Accepted what? What do you mean?
We accept disparate treatment for people. We accept the fact that if you're rich, you get away with it. And we accept the fact that if you're poor and you've done very little in comparison, that the book will get thrown at you. That's just the way it is in this country. That's just the way it is. And this is not decrying, United States of America. And again, I'm simply talking about the disparities in the criminal justice system often have to do with those issues. And it's hiding in plain sight.
Tony Thetford is my guest, criminal defense lawyer here in the city of Chicago. We're going to get a little more specific. We'll take a break, get a little more specific when we come back. Talk about the debate between Mayor Lori Lightfoot, and Tony Preckwinkle, Cook County Board President. Man, the two of them just got finished running an election against each other, and now they're debating each other. But a very interesting debate over who is most responsible. This is like anybody, one person could be most responsible for crime in the city of Chicago. Judges who are too lenient, and the state's attorney is too lenient, allowing people to get back in the street with easy bail, or the police department for not having enough detectives to clear cases. We'll talk about that issue when we return.
Read the Chicago Reader to get up to speed on what's what in Chicago. Culture, food, arts and entertainment, weekly concert listings, weekly event listings, the environment, travel. I can continue, but you get the point. And for all of you Chicago political junkies, raw weekly columns on real city politics from Maya Dukmasova and our very own Ben Joravsky. The Chicago Reader, free to the public in newsstands throughout the city and online at chicagoreader.com. Read it now and be a more informed Chicagoan. Our friends and co-hosts at the Chicago Sun-Times are offering you, the listener, an exclusive deal on unlimited digital access to all of the stories that you love. Unlock every feature, video, and podcast, just like this one, The Ben Joravsky Show, by signing up now for a digital subscription. For a limited time only, you, again, the listener, can test out digital access for only $1. Seriously, guys. $1. There's no reason to not give it a shot. Stay up to date on breaking stories. Get the deep dives and investigations from Sun-Times reporters. Cheer for the big games with the best sports team in the city, and go deep inside City Hall with best-in-class political reporting. $1 for your first month. I repeat, $1 for your first month. You really can't do better than that. Hey, welcome back to the Ben Joravsky Show. Mr. Joravsky, take us home.
All right, will do. That super cool music means we're almost done with another show, but we're not done yet. Tony Thetford is in the studio with me, criminal defense lawyer. I set it up, Tony, for a discussion on this debate that's been going back and forth between Lori Lightfoot and Tony Preckwinkle. I'm looking at a picture of them here in the Sun Times, shaking hands, looking very nice.
And not only is he a great lawyer, he's also a fantastic piano player. Listen to him.
This is what I do. This is what I do.
Whoa.
Dr. T uses the gag. I forgot.
I got your back, man.
Yeah. Yes, but Tony plays a great piano. I forgot that gag. Yes, and I was so focused on this on this discussion.
Really good.
Yeah, you're really good, Tony.
I just picked it up.
Just when he walked in here.
Just on my way in.
Yeah, well, that piano's right behind you.
Eat your heart out, Elton John.
Let's put the piano away, Tony, and let's focus on the issues. Yes, you must. You got to talk about Tony Preckwinkle, Lori Lightfoot, and no piano playing for you.
Okay.
All right. So, Lori Lightfoot said, and Eddie Johnson, the police chief, said that the judges are letting repeat offenders out too easily, and Tony Preckwinkle countered, defending her judges because she's the president of the Cook County Board, saying, stop blaming us, hire more detectives and clear more cases. What's your thoughts on all this?
This is, we're seeing skirmishes in this debate right now. This debate has been going on for a long time. What President Preckwinkle has led has been admirable. She was the first politician in this town who stemmed the tide on over-policing, who began to stem the tide as related to over-incarceration. What was happening at Cook County Jail was deplorable. There were at 11,000 people, I believe, in a jail that could probably hold about 9. That jail census now has been cut in half. I think there's about 6,000 people on a daily basis. That's all due to Preckwinkle's push for more deliberate policing in terms of not locking up these low-level offenders. Bond reform has been amazing for the citizens of Cook County. We were going the wrong way. We were going to build another jail to house 25,000 people because the bonds that were set for each individual there was 10 times what they could possibly afford. So with bond reform, we've actually seen the numbers go down in terms of recidivism. I think the article indicates President Preckwinkle's position regarding that. The numbers don't lie. What happens is, and I was surprised, frankly, when Mayor Lightfoot reappointed Eddie Johnson. Because Johnson's numbers aren't coming down or they're not clearing cases, they look to point blame. So they're blaming judges for actually following the law. And these judges that are granting bond to gun offenders or alleged gun offenders or other individuals who fall into the category of what they're referring to, these people aren't coming back. They aren't reviolating while they're on bond. There may be new cases, but that has nothing to do with those people to whom those judges gave reasonable bonds. And I applaud Kim Foxx's office, honestly, for their progression in terms of how they attempt to prosecute these cases. I will tell you, as someone who's in these courts every day, it hasn't been easier for me and for my clients in terms of their approach to the cases. However, the lawyers in Kim Foxx's office actually listen now. That didn't happen before. If you have a position or if you have a client who should deserve some consideration, they will at least listen. And what's happening with Kim Foxx, what's happening by extension, President Preckwinkle, because we all know that Kim Foxx was her anointed. There's a wave of progressive prosecutors around the country right now. Larry Krasner in Philadelphia, if you've heard about, down in Texas. In Brooklyn, I think the young person who just was a public defender, who just became the prosecutor. What's happening is that we're getting this backlash from the old guard because they're not used to consideration being given to people or power being taken out of their hands. And I'm talking about law enforcement here. Mm-hmm. They're not used to power being taken out of their hands in terms of how they treat people. So again, the numbers don't lie in terms of the recidivism and those kind of issues. And the numbers don't lie in terms of the difficulty that the Chicago Police Department is having in clearing violent crime cases. So they look to blame other people, and they blame those people who stand stand for progress in terms of our criminal justice system. If you note, if you remember a few weeks ago, when there was the big Daily Center protest about Smollett and the alleged favorable treatment that he got, you had all of these retired police officers, many wearing MAGA hats and Confederate flags, you know, and it became this huge argument about race. And all of a sudden there's this black prosecutor who they believe are letting people out of jail and all these things that aren't true. So it becomes this symbol. So they'll take any failure that she may have, including Smollett, if that is a failure, I don't know what happened there, and try to use that to say that she's incompetent, inept, and unable to do that job. But change is coming. And we can't continue in this country to exist where we just lock people up over and over again. And let's be clear. These are pretrial detainees. They've been found guilty of nothing. And these pretrial detainees, if you go to Cook County Jail, are all black and brown. So they're comfortable having these people locked away on allegations. What happens with these allegations? If I'm locked up, the likelihood of me pleading guilty to something that maybe I didn't do is exponentially greater because I want out.
Yeah.
And so now that people are seeing more reasonable bonds, the outcomes are more legitimate, I believe.
All right. I just will say this about Smollett. I cannot allow it to pass because we talk about Smollett so much on this show with Andy Grimm and Ramana Hussein, who was here earlier today. I hear what you're saying about the issue, the larger issue of what Kim Foxx is talking about, but there's no doubt in my mind that a phone call was made in that case as well. I was just talking about the phone call that I believe was made with Jeffrey Epstein. I know a phone call was made, and this is my problem with Smollett-gate. And on this particular issue, I do not believe our state's attorneys or our prosecutors should be taking phone calls from people representing powerful. It's the same thing with Jeffrey Epstein as it was with Smollett. A phone call was made. It's not the same. So the kid who's picked up has a joint on the west side. Nobody's making a phone call for that guy.
Well, you know, Ben, I got to take a bit of exception to that, and this is no defense of Kim Foxx. Okay, I oppose her every day. It's my job as a defense lawyer. So again, I'm not an advocate for Kim Foxx, but I just want to be fair to folk.
Go ahead.
I make phone calls all the time on behalf of my clients. I make phone calls to the prosecutor and say to them, look, this is what's going on. Can we have this conversation? So was a phone call made? I'm sure there was. But let's not be naive that phone calls aren't made all the time. It doesn't mean that I have any leverage when I make the phone call in order to get them to do what I want them to do.
Let me ask you this question.
But I'm starting a conversation.
All right. Have you ever called the state's attorney, not some lower level prosecutor?
I have not.
The state's attorney and said, excuse me, state's attorney, let's move this case from the jurisdiction of the Chicago Police Department to the FBI. Can you do that for me? Have you ever done that?
I have not.
Okay.
I don't know that that's what happened, though. Again,
isn't that the allegation? Isn't that what I think she's actually agreed that that's what happened. That the phone call came in from some kind of a relative of Smollett saying, "Hey, I'm worried about leaks coming from the police department. Could you have this moved to the federal investigators?" And I believe she called Eddie Johnson himself. She notified the police chief, as opposed to saying, "I think this is an inappropriate phone call."
This whole thing is blowing up in her face. And it would be unfortunate if the progressive work that she's doing is somehow stunted. And that real possibility exists. And we see it in national politics all the time. If they can find one crack in order to be able to castigate someone and to be able to derail their policies. But yeah, I mean, if she did that,
you know what? That point is the one I always make. It's the real victim, the person that gets hurt the most, are people who would be defended, who would be protected by a different attitude toward criminal justice. And absolutely, that's the valid point to make. Here's what Lori Lightfoot said and I'm quoting from the Sun-Times: "In a high-stakes game of political poker, Lightfoot then challenged Prickmickle to put her cards on the table." This is the Sun-Times writing, and here's the quote. "My proposal," Lori Lightfoot says, "is that we put our data on a weekly basis. My proposal is that we all put our data out on a weekly basis and see who's getting arrested. what are the charges? What are the bond decisions being made? And separately, if they are on bond, what are the results? We will put our data up, and I want the county to do the same on a weekly basis. That's how we can get to some answers. What's your thoughts on that?
Fine. I'm very pro data. I would be interested to see how consistent the Chicago Police Department are with their data. We do these things all the time where it's like a put up or shut up. When we start putting up, there are some truths that people don't want to pay attention to. That often happens when there's a dissemination of data in this form. Preckwinkle, or the county, has put up data to defend bail reform. So that's been ongoing. Now, maybe it's not a weekly piece. I certainly haven't noticed that it's been that. And again, I'm too busy to keep up with it that intently. But yeah, let's put the data out there. I believe and I know that what I'm saying is correct relative to the recidivism rate, or those people on bond who reoffend while on bond. The purpose of bond is to ensure that someone comes to court. It's not to punish them on the front end for allegations. And that's what gets skewed in this debate. Oh, the judges are letting these dangerous people out. These people are charged with crimes. They've been convicted of nothing. And generally they stay in jail because they're poor. Those stats are overwhelmingly out there. So I would challenge anyone who doesn't believe that part of it to show me otherwise, or to show anyone otherwise, because it's ridiculous. And this is data that's been accumulated over decades in this town.
I agree with you 100%. I do hope Preckwinkle takes her up on it. I hope there's some substance that comes out of this disagreement. I think it's an illuminating debate.
Right.
That's and now that the challenge is there, let's see the data.
Right.
Maybe that would inform us what's the best policy to pursue.
Yeah. I'm for what works.
Yeah.
And this actually works. Bail reform has actually worked. It's working nationally. Maybe it's a trickle in the stream, but it's doing something, and we're pushing things the other way in criminal justice reform, and we have to start somewhere.
All right, very good. That is Tony Thedford. And Tony, it's a real pleasure having you on the show, having these conversations. I hope to bring you back. This is
I want to come back
on the show, and you maybe play the piano a little more when he returns.
Bring the drums next time.
Do it. Play Wipeout.
You have an update from yourself?
Absolutely. Before we get out of here, we have an update. So earlier in the program, we talked about Donald Trump and rapper A$AP Rocky. We have an update on that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Trump said he and Kanye West had talked about rapper A$AP Rocky, who has been detained in Sweden over an alleged aggravated assault since earlier this month. The president said he would be in contact with the Swedish prime minister to address the situation. He tweeted about it. Yeah, surprise, he tweeted about it. Luckily, I have Donald Trump's Twitter page open in my browser. It's got to click over on it real quick. Just hang tight with me here. 1 second. Let me find Donald Trump's Twitter page. Oh, okay. We're on Donald Trump's Twitter page.
Here we go.
All right, here's the tweet from the president.
Just spoke to @Kanye West about his friend A$AP Rocky's incarceration. I'll be calling the very talented Prime Minister of Sweden to see what we can do about helping A$AP Rocky. So many people would like to see this quickly resolved.
All right, Tony. I gotta hear your thoughts on this one.
The phone call. Seems to be our theme, right?
Yeah.
The phone call.
The phone call.
It's just more foolishness. I mean, I don't know what's going on with this, with A$AP Rocky and his situation over there. But again, he'll get on the phone because Kanye West called him to help this gentleman out who's in a foreign country. How about the other folk who are being maybe unlawfully detained in different jurisdictions? How about the other folk in this country who need the help or the intervention of someone in power like the President of the United States or even Kanye West? How about we get on that? This is all just entertainment crap that is a waste of people's time and is demeaning to the office of the President of the United States. This is a joke.
Yeah.
And it's disgusting.
Well, and it does follow on the heels of 4 or 5 nonstop days of Donald Trump battling 4 congresswomen of color, and leading or not leading, but basking in the glory of the send her back chance, and then suddenly people are calling him a racist. He goes,
he thinks
I know what
gonna
I do.
Fix it.
Yeah, I'm gonna. My good friend Kanye West.
Again, someone who's in a different strata because he's wealthy. But that's his black contact. So now he's going to prove and will likely argue, see, I'm not racist. I just talked to Kanye West to help another black man out who's in Sweden or Switzerland, wherever he is.
Yeah.
Both of whom happen to be very wealthy.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Well, they asked him about Ilhan Omar, and then when he diverted by talking about A$AP Rocky during that press conference.
Yeah, so I figured that's Donald Trump, man. He's going to come back to Kanye West. The number of people he could turn to, black people that he could turn to, is dwindling. He's got Kanye, and I don't know who else is on that list.
Steve Harvey for a minute?
Steve for a minute, yeah.
Steve came in his senses, yeah.
Yeah, and so anyway, Tony Thetford, thank you so much for being here. I also want to thank our previous guests, Sergio Vicente, DeFran Smart, Roman Hussein was here earlier in the day. Ali, you did a magnificent job, as always. And, of course, the man, the myth, the legend. He has battled so much this week. Pride and joy of all Illinois. He had the root canal surgery. He came. He played in pain. We got off to a late start today because the board wasn't working.
I was flipping out.
He figured it all out. He is, you know what they call him back home in Alton? You don't know this. Do you know
what's that?
What is his name? White Lightning. That's
White
what they call him. Because he's so fast. That's what they call him in Alton, Illinois. The man.
Is that the name of a moonshine, you think?
It's about to be.
So give yourself a raise. Take it out of petty cash. Have a great weekend, everybody.
And remember, you can download previous Ben Joravsky shows at both Chicago Sun-Times and Chicago Reader websites, chicago.suntimes.com/pages/Joravsky, chicagoreader.com, and wherever else you download your favorite podcast downloaders. We live stream the program Tuesday through Friday, 1 until 3 p.m. Central Time. Both Chicago Sun-Times, Chicago Reader websites, and the Chicago Sun-Times YouTube page. Check out Ben Joravsky's article. Wait for those bonus interviews. They're coming as well. See you Tuesday.